Yeah, go
of
ahead. We can pick
Egypt.
up.
Just a second. Let me source it first. Let me get my source ready. You always gotta have your sources. This is
Definitely want to combine this shit.
this is Early Hydraulic Civilization in Egypt by Carl W. Butzer. Okay, so if you read the book Carl W. Butzer, Early Hydraulic Civilization in Egypt, right? He has a section where they discuss population growth in Egypt, right? So let's look at the numbers in the valley, right? 240 and 40 240,000 in 4000 BC, 600,000 in 3000 BC, a million in 2500 BC, 1.1 million 1800 BC, 1200 BC, 1.6 million, 150 BC, 2.4 million. Okay. Let's look at the Fayum. 4000 BC, uh, 3000, 3000 BC, 6000, 2500 BC, 9000, 1800 BC, 61,000, 1250 BC, 72,000. And then the last figure would be 150 BC, 312,000. The Delta, this is the very northern part of the Nile Delta in Egypt, right? So 4000 BC, 80,000. 3000 BC, 210,000. 2500 B, 540,000. 1800 BC, 750,000. 1250 BC, 1.1 million. 150 BC, 2.16 million. So I mean, there seems to be like a stable population growth in the valley, the southern parts of Egypt, but then in some northern parts of Egypt, there was something happening. It looks like, and that comports with what the study was saying. There were Roman and Greek, people who settled in there, but also you had the Hyksos, right? During the end of the Middle Kingdom, who also immigrated into Egypt.
Yeah, that was a.
Immigrated? Yeah, they invaded.
You sure about
Immigrate?
that, Aston? You sure about that?
No, that was
That's not
Lucifer.
Aston. The Hyksos, they immigrated. I mean, they came in. Some of them were servants to like pharaohs and whatnot. They slowly
Mhm.
they trickled in, and then they got enough power to where, you know.
Yeah, I call that an invasion. You can have an overt invasion or a covert invasion. They chose covert. That's how white people took India.
I mean, yeah,
That's
they've
true. That's true. But I think what they mean when they say invasion, Lou, like here we come with our military, we about to take over your shit. Versus how white people do, like how you said how they did in India. They come in a little bit at a time. They come in friendly. They come in acting like they got some sense. They come in following the rules. All the while in the back of their mind, they saying, "Boy, as soon as we get more of our people in here, we gonna take over this shit." And they're adopting the
Yeah,
culture too. They're
yeah. Hold
adopting
on,
their
wait, hold on.
culture.
Yeah, yeah. That's how the white Goths took Rome 410 AD as well. They worked as border guards first, and then got their numbers up on the border and opened the gates, and that was a wrap. So the I define invasion mathematically as a swapping of those in power after the population has been adjusted. So the white people can come in, integrate, set up businesses, and do all the economics. But if they don't seize power, it's not an invasion. It's just them integrating. We keep conflating integration and immigration, and just keep omitting that the fact is, at the end of the day, those motherfuckers stole all the power and all the resources. So it is de facto an invasion. It doesn't matter how they got it done. That's what the result is.
Agreed. Ultimately, it
Yeah.
was that. Agreed.
I mean,
I
we also know. I've looked into Scholar as well when it came to the Hyksos. Again, we already know the Hyksos. They did primarily, if not exclusively, take over Lower Egypt. I put that in the jumbotron. A lot of the Scholar information on them. but also the fact that these people weren't completely innocent as well. We know that yes, these were an invasive species. They did migrate, or however you want to put it, as well from the Levant, and that
You
according
said
to the scholar,
species.
that these Hyksos were foreign conquerors, and they were hated by their native subjects. And after the expulsion, every effort was naturally made to destroy their monuments and to basically destroy their memory. These were an invasive species, and they became to be a bit of a nuisance as well. They had no respect for ancient Egypt, and it was one of the reasons why I believe it was Manuhotep who also wanted to bring prestige back to Lower Egypt as well, back to Old Kingdom. Um, but Trey, you had something to say as well?
I mean, no, I mean the Hyksos, they did what they did. They got kicked the fuck out. That's really it.
And was it by
Um,
Thutmose for the most part first?
Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa! They ruled for 300 years, and quite brutally, according to the
no, it wasn't.
Nubians and the Egyptians.
It wasn't. They immigrated and lived amongst the Egyptians for about 150 to about 200 years. They didn't formally overthrow the Egyptian government of Lower Egypt until about the last 100 years, maybe. Yeah,
Well,
about 100 years or so.
before we go super deep into the Hyksos, I did want to review Soy Kita's analysis of this paper, if we want.
Oh
Please
well,
do.
let me just add on the context there. The Hyksos were also blacks, so anti-blackness was still practiced by a black invasion.
Yeah, they weren't. Hold up.
They were
Where's
mixed.
where's
Yep,
my
yep, yep.
button?
They were mixed. They were
Hold
black.
up. Let me
And that's
press my
some. Hold on,
safety
hold on,
button.
hold on, hold on.
Pseudo alert. Pseudo alert.
Hey, no. After this though, I did
It's
want to
not a pseudo
revisit.
alert.
All right, I'm
Go
here.
ahead.
I'm here. So, so let me just read it. So, the samples can be questioned as to the representativeness of Egypt in terms of size, spatial, temporal, and social cultural aspects. All the samples are from the northern half of Egypt, from one nome, which is 2.4%, 1 in 42 of ancient Egyptian nomes. Ancient Egyptian culture originated in southern Upper Egypt. The socio-cultural dynamics are not fully considered. The information on the origin and social status is incomplete are unknowable in fact. The mummies are clearly assumed to be representative of the local population based on an incomplete archaeological report, in spite of the historical information provided about northern Egypt's interaction with the Near East since pre-dynastic and the known settlement of Greeks and others in northern Egypt in later periods. The timeline is not representative of ancient Egyptian history. 3,000 years is missing, right? And so they only looked at, I mean, I think Christopher Ehret states, or was it Stuart Tyson Smith, that the majority of the mummies came after 1100 AD. I mean, sorry, BC. The samples cannot be convincingly said to represent true breeding populations or those that truly integrate historical information. The authors use Bayesian reconstruction of population size changes through time with beasts, for which there is generally a discrepancy between the marginal prior and the original prior distribution. The available information on the comparison between the original and marginal priors and on prior and posterior distributions does not take into account possible population substructure. Sex bias sampling of mtDNA cannot recover population demography of the whole country unless the sample size is large enough and representative in terms of chronology, regional variation, ethnicities, class, and geography. It suffers from many biases that can affect the assessment of the effective population size changes, mutation bias, and natural selection. The whole genome size is too small, n equals 3, to accurately permit a discussion of all Egyptian population history from north to south. And then he also goes into a section where he talks about M1A and M1A1 and M1 in general, how it's East African. And it is East African, but for some reason in the study, like Stuart Tyson Smith said, it's not. It's not in this study. He also goes into the idea that they're talking about sub-Saharan Africans, but don't even like suggest. They do suggest that North Africans exist, but they don't reference them as a possible population that Egyptians could be similar to. Oddly enough, there is sub-Saharan African, and then there's Eurasian, essentially. What Soykita didn't mention, which I'm curious to learn more about, is that they say that there are haplogroups, and I'm wondering if they're talking about like R1b, right? And whether they were counting like R1b as being European. because I'm not sure anyone has ever verified which clade of R1B was actually in Egypt in terms of King Tut and whatnot. But that goes back to the conversation about press coverage, because when King Tut was tested as R1B, we all remember, half of European males have the same haplogroup as King Tut and whatnot. But Soikita gives a pretty good breakdown of what we've been talking about, and in terms of like having genetic studies be informed by actual history. And this study was very informed on the history; they just didn't apply it in their analysis of the genetic data that they had in front of them.
Good breakdown. Good breakdown. And I would also like to give myself credit about Keita's response. Yes, I will. I will go there. I emailed Keita about 10 years ago when the DNA tribe study first came out, and the haplogroup for Ramses the third came out by Hawass. I emailed him and I sent them both of them studies, and he didn't know about them. Matter of fact, like I just mentioned them. I said, "So what do you think about dot dot dot?" He was like, "What? Man, send me them studies." And I sent them both of them, and it was like, "Nah, man, I didn't hear anything about this." And next thing you know, in 2018, when they do the Abusir shit, he actually uses the same format that DNA tribes use in the SDR metric. For all of the Amana period and the Ramside dynasty, or Ramses and his son. And he pointed out that or DNA tribes, they went into specifics about which region it was. Um, you know, uh, Toss up between Southern Africa and Great Lakes for the most part, with some West Africa in there. But uh, what Keita did was he kind of broke it down. I didn't like what he did as far as just calling it sub-Saharan African. Like that's the thing I didn't really like too much about like his study. And I mean I respect it because it ultimately discredits the notion that they were not quote unquote black. But what he did was basically he said what was the probability that they will match any and all sub-Saharan African populations, and every one of them was like 90%,
Well,
90
yeah, no.
plus.
So they had eight STRs, I believe. 8 out of 13 pairs of STRs from combined DNA index system were used by Hawass. So this is Hawass's famous study, right? Revisiting the harem conspiracy. That nobody really talked about that E1B1A that Rameses had, but R1B. Oh, they shot to the moon with it because R1B can be interpreted as European. The places that it's the highest, I believe, 90% is in like Sahel, like in northern Cameroon, and Chadic speakers, then we know that maybe it's possible that there is some connection between, them. There's a huge connection between Chadic, the language, in Proto-Chadic, and what we know as ancient Egyptian. So that actually would be no surprise if you're informed about at least the linguistic history, right? But Western Europe is also a pretty good candidate because we know the Vikings were pharaohs. That's a joke, but yeah, so like he had 8 out of 13 STRs, and so I think that instead of trying to shoot for like saying that this is an Ethiopian, he was just trying to establish, hey, there was sub-Saharan African ancestry in ancient Egypt, and it wasn't just marginal. We find it in pharaohs. We find it in Amenhotep III, right? We find it in Tutankhamun. We find it in Ramesses III, and so what does that mean for your data? Tell us about that, right? Can you incorporate this information into your data? And is anyone covering that? No. I mean, that's just not what gets the attention. Noom, Not, and Ankh do not
Well,
get
that's
attention.
why we need our own media, though. You can't rely on white people to tell the history that they don't want to tell. We need
Hey,
black
oh, that's a good one.
institutions that are going to put that information out there.
That's good, Ashley. I just kind of thought about that. Ooh, you just kind of put that in my head. Like maybe like for example, this Yemeni study. Maybe when studies come out, maybe we can shoot them to. I know Tariq ain't gonna talk about it, but maybe like Phil, uh, from the Avive show, and then he actually covers a lot of that Egyptology bullshit. But maybe when we get, I'm gonna email, I'm gonna hit Phil up, and maybe when we get some of these studies and shit, we can toss them to him, and he can put it out there to the masses. because nobody
Phil
knows about
who?
this shit.
Phil who?
Phil from the Abusir show slash the African Diaspora Network. He got like a million on viewers on YouTube. Subscribe. He's probably the biggest quote unquote new black media platform dude out there. But
Man, you know who should have been on there talking about it? Henry Louis
who
Gates. That's who should have been talking
nobody like
about it
his ass.
on National
What?
Geographic and on PBS and
Oh,
on ABC in prime time.
oh, oh. You mean? Oh, okay. I thought you just meant just in
Yeah, I
general. Yeah.
mean real
But do
black
you think
media.
he would though? But I don't like Henry Louis Gates to a degree because I'll never forget that. I had so much faith in his little series he had. Um Lost Kingdoms of Africa. I had so much faith in that till I watched it. And when he came to Nubia and when he came like at the very beginning of the Nubia slash Egypt episode, like he's like sailing on a river or something, and he just comes with this bullshit. Were the Egyptians white? Were the Egyptians black? We don't know that question. But the Nubians were definitely black. And I just like, just what a bitch statement to make to me. I just when he did that, I just lost so much respect for him, and that just I I did not even
He,
continue to watch
but he
that
also
series.
hosted Stuart Tyson Smith. You got to understand that, right? He collaborated with Stuart Tyson
Man,
Smith during Black History Month, right?
Lord,
And Stuart
nah, I'm
Tyson
good on
Smith
that,
is a
bro.
big
I'm
proponent.
good. I'm
He's a
good on
big
that.
proponent of indigenous African, quote unquote, Black Egypt. So I appreciate Louis Gates Jr. for that. But the name of the study from Soy Kita, or the write up from Soy Kita, I should say, is Ancient Egyptian Genomes from Northern Egypt. Further discussion. It's very passive aggressive in its title because it says it's from Northern Egypt. They want you to know it's not even the middle. It's north. This is the very north of Egypt.
I didn't even peep the title like that. I thought it did say. Yeah, but he stuck him. Oh, actually, I'm gonna try to get in con. I tried to hit up Geraldine, the guy who co-authored that study with him. He's on Twitter. Maybe y'all can contact him better than me. But yeah, he went on Asar Imhotep's channel not too long ago, and yeah, he shitted on that study, dog.
Here's a
I mean,
question:
like,
did someone from that team recently pass away? And was it him?
who Geraldine?
Yeah, did somebody from that team recently passed away? I want to say I saw like an anthropologist, geneticist rip, and it was a black guy, and I read the name, and I'm like, I think that's the guy that published on the
Did
Kita
he
study.
have Did he have dreads?
I
Did he
didn't
have
see the
dreads?
picture, but that's the guy I'm talking about. But I didn't see the picture.
Damn, they killed him. Damn.
Ah, I don't know if it's him. I don't know if it's
They know
him, but
Keita. They know Keita's on his way out. They
uh,
killed the new generation. That's how it is, man. Damn.
they, huh?
God damn. I gotta look. I gotta look. Damn. I gotta look
Look
into
him
that.
up.
Damn.
Look him up. Here's a question
Cause
for
I was
you,
real.
right?
Cause I
You
was
know they.
real. Because when I saw,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
what you saying?
No, I'm gonna let you finish.
I'm, I mean, I'm just. It's like when I saw that. I didn't know he was black until sorry, Imhotep interviewed him, and I saw he was black, and I just got so much hope. I'm like, yes. We got another geneticist in the battlefield, putting
His
in work.
brother is also a geneticist. I hope you're wrong, Aston. By the way, I really hope you're wrong. I know
I
you do
pray
too.
he's wrong. I pray he's wrong because, like, literally, there's someone on the back
They
of my
have the
mind. Like, what's
same
gonna happen?
name.
Huh?
One is John Philip Gordine from Oregon Health and Science University. Another one is John Luc Gordine from French National Institute. They're very similar names.
And you saying that brothers?
Likely so, yes.
Oh wow. Yeah, I'm about to check into that, Ashton, man, because I wrote dude, man, like a month or two ago to ask him a question about it, and yeah, I ain't get no response, man. Damn, I'm about to check his Twitter real quick. I'm about to check his page. See if dude is kicking. Hey, when did you hear that news, Ashton?
I want to say I saw it on Twitter. And
Recently or like
I
months ago? Or?
briefly nah, within the past 3 weeks.
I didn't hear a saw
But I,
Imhotep.
I have a I have
A
a
saw.
technical question
Go.
about the like the way I read things. There's a study coming out on southern Egypt, and they have mitochondrial DNA, and they basically say, some of the lineages found in southern Egypt, which are quite old, are similar to the ones at Abusir, right? And so the question becomes then, that type of ancestry, right? What events could be responsible for that type of ancestry in that part of Africa, and how long ago could that have happened?
I
Right.
would
And
have to
so
see
instead of
that
just
paper before I
dismissing the
even speculate
information,
on that.
the question is, when could it have arrived? What events? Anybody?
I mean, you just talking about. I mean, when just the mere fact that they talk about, the connection to the Neolithic Turkish people. I mean, the only plausible event I can think of is the event in which the Tufians left out of Africa, the late Palestine period.
Hold on. What time period is that? Neolithic and other
But
area?
yeah, that's what I'm talking about. The Neolithic era is just such a vast era. I think it starts what at 10,000 BC into 1,000, if I'm correct. So there's going to be a large range of age or years of which we're talking about. Anything beyond 6,000, we already know who these people would be. It just comes down to when, where, and what particular um, event could have happened. We do know, Bodhi pointed out, whether the Hyksos or people over in the Levant would have been black at that particular time. I wanted to point out that Herodotus did speak on the fact that the Colchians, he said that they were black and they were very similar to the Egyptians. And they even brought that up in during the UNESCO conference when they were trying to solidify who these people were. Obenga also went on to point out that there was neither disputed it was neither disputed by modern scholarship nor invalidated by the comparative critical studying of manuscripts during that conference. So there's not even pushback on the fact of what Herodotus was saying about them and these people and this population. So even in as late as the first millennium BC, in which Herodotus lived, these were still black people that inhabited that area.
Yeah.
That
I
that's
think
kind of the
quote.
answer, but that's not the answer I'm looking for.
Well,
Somebody
So
hold
What
at
on.
I
that
knows.
was
point, I
saying, but hold
Oh,
on, hold
hold
on,
on,
hold on,
hold
hold
on,
on,
hold
hold
on.
on. But what I was saying though
And let
was
me rephrase what I'm trying to say.
the,
Let me rephrase it.
mhm.
What I'm trying to say is very likely that people in that part of the world have multiple lines of ancestry, right? Some from here, some from there, some from here, some from there. The question is, when you look at those lineages, how old could that ancestry be, and what type of demographic events could that be related to?
I mean, when you look at the Near East, I mean, the largest events we know of are the Natufian situation, in which the around 13,000 to 12,500 BC, they left up out of Africa, went into the Levant, went north into Anatolia and into Europe. We know that was one huge event. We know
We talk
another
about people
event.
coming into Africa.
Okay, coming into Africa. Well, I can say the regions adjacent to Africa, as far as as far as events, the Bronze Age collapse. That was in the vicinity of Africa, but it didn't. As we know, Ramses III kind of stopped that bullshit from coming into Kemet and subsequently Africa outside of Libya. But I mean, as far as people coming into Africa, um,
Yeah. Let's
I
say,
mean,
let's say, okay, they got Abu Sir. Abu Sir is kind of late, and now they saying we got Upper Egyptians, that's Old Kingdom, and it's kind of like Abu Sir. What if they say we got pre-dynastics from Abydos, that's kind of like Abu Sir? So how old are
at that
those
point,
type of
Ashton,
people? Yeah.
I have to
at
ask.
that point, Ashton, I would accept the some
Well, honestly, no, because Abusir says that it doesn't really connect them to North African populations. So I could not even believe
It
it. Right?
does. It does.
North
Some of those
Africa is
might.
not
Neolithic,
even mentioned.
Neolithic Turks, right? That's not. It didn't connect them to any modern.
It was
If
Anatolian
it connected,
farmers and Levantine people, not North Africans.
right? I mean, if it connected them to other North Africans, Lydia, I mean, that would be Lydia's Bible. It is here. It's get you, auntie. We are Egyptians. You know,
Yeah,
and I
but y'all
mean,
y'all dodging the
if they,
question. The question I'm asking is a
No, no, no.
question that you have to
If that
answer.
were the case, I would accept. Okay, it has to be North African. I'm not accepting this European stuff. I would accept this. I guess Iber-Marusian back migration 12,000 years ago hypothesis. I would say, okay, they must have been a group of Semitic people, and maybe ancient Egyptian is more connected to Semitic than we thought. We probably got that wrong. Oddly enough, the culture started in the south. I don't know how you explain that and the interconnections with Nubians. So we would have to basically rewrite the archaeology of Egypt. But once we do
I don't
that,
think you
I
would.
would,
I don't think you
yeah,
would. I don't think you
you
would have
will,
to
you will.
rewrite it. I don't think you would. I
No,
don't
no,
think
no,
you
Okay,
no.
well,
would.
But the
Aston,
thing is,
but
Aston, if it was similar to Abu Sir, right? Let's say you get it, like you get a real bona fide study, right? That really did a good job of
Mm-hmm.
investigating this question, right? Comprehensive study, which we probably won't get. But if we got that, right, and it said what you're saying, right, then I how so maybe the Nubians, because like Nubians, are we saying that Nubians were similar to Europeans and Levantine farmers?
No,
Is that what
no,
we're doing now?
no. And let me clarify. I don't mean that all of Egypt is like Abu Sir. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just asking when did that type of ancestry show up? And I think that we have to, you know, look at archaeology and say, you know what? It seems to be maybe it's related to this, or maybe it's related to this, or maybe it's related to the people that brought this, like the camel, right? Maybe it's related to the people that brought the camel, but the camel is kind of young, so maybe it's related to the people that brought, you know, A, B, and C.
okay, well, if we're talking about the Abu Sir mummies, that sample would have to come in with the Sea People's invasions. You understand that, right? Like 1200 BC, Sea Peoples.
Yeah, but if they find people in the old kingdom like with that ancestry, then it's older than the sea
Oh, I
people.
wouldn't be surprised. I mean, no, I wouldn't be surprised that you'd have people in the Old Kingdom who would not be quote unquote North Tropical Sub-Saharan African or whatever term Sword Kita uses. We know for a fact that there were people in Egypt like that since the Old Kingdom. The question is, was that the population of Egypt, right?
It was
Um,
part of it, right? It was
Well,
part of it.
hold on. Okay, hold on. Are we factoring in royal incest and how it produces these gene markers that are shared by albinoid races across the rest of the planet? Like
pseudo
when they say European, they're specifically referring to OCA gene markers that they carry because of their incest and ancestry from Kazakhstan. When they find an inbred black person, they always say, "Oh, he's European related," because they have those same defects. So we got to separate black
That's not
albinism from white
that's
albinism.
pseudoscience. That's not
It,
anthropology.
it's
Can
it,
anybody
it's not
here
it's not
say
pseudoscience.
what West Asians contributed to that part of Africa in terms of like technology? Does anybody know? Somebody has to know.
I
I
mean,
mean, I
so
think it is
In North
interesting.
Africa, right? So like sheep's and goats, we know that they were like domesticates that came into Egypt from other places. Sure, not Egypt, just
And the
Africa
cat,
from other places. The cat,
And the cat,
what?
the
I've been
cat,
possibly
lied
the
to.
cat, possibly the domesticated cat, possibly.
yeah, that comes from Asia. It's
But
possibly
but like
China.
that's
But
my point.
the
That's
names
my
for
point.
them are Egyptian though. The ancient Egyptians
Yeah,
had their
but
own names for
but
them.
but
but my
if it was
question, but
already
my thing,
domesticated, the point is if me there was this is how I do it. When I look at that ancestry, I'd be like, okay, if it's found in this age and if it's found at this age, then it's highly likely that this is related to the portion of their ancestors that brought sheep and goats. Yeah, I
Yeah,
like to put things in archaeological perspective. Otherwise,
I
you
would
just
be fine
left
with
trying
that.
to dismiss everything, and that's like useless.
But my question would have to be
Wait, hold
though.
on,
But
hold
my
on, wait.
question, hold on,
Aston is saying that he's now taking on the Lucifer perspective on history. Nice.
but nah, but I would like to.
No, that's whatever.
I would. I
I
like
knew
to. I
Aston
like
was
to
gonna
make.
respond. I knew Aston was gonna respond. I'm sorry.
No, you good. But nah. I mean, when we talk about people coming into the Levant, coming in from the Levant, as far as having any significant ancestry, well, how would that kind of, what would the linguistic ramifications of them coming in be? I mean, what we already know from what Keita says is those domesticates came in on their own terms. These were Africans who
Right.
these were Africans who discovered it on their own, and so that's not really an indicative of gene flow.
No,
So,
you're right. It's not an indication of gene flow, but it gives you the idea of the possibilities of when it could have occurred. Right?
but at the same time, though, I wouldn't even consider that to be a situation where that did occur because
What? What?
well, because from a linguistic standpoint,
I
what
think you're missing the point. I'm not asking did it happen. I'm asking
because we
what are
know it
the
didn't,
events
right?
that created the possibilities for it to
I
happen.
want to see the North
Right?
African ancestry. That's what I want to see. I want to
Right.
see
I'd rather
Okay,
see,
well,
I
how.
just rather see the study before I
Right.
even get in that
Absolutely.
sort
okay,
of
I
well,
agree.
hold
speculation.
on. Well,
Yeah,
hold on.
I'll just say be prepared for some rude awakenings. That's all I'm gonna say. Just people
Oh,
have to be
Aston,
prepared. It's like it is a
Aston,
perfect example.
Aston,
Yeah.
Aston. Real History Worldwide has already pointed out these NCA gene
Ah,
markers.
man. God, let
He's
me
my bad. Hold
already
on.
block your
he's a
dumbass.
geneticist. Hold on.
Block.
So you're disputing a black geneticist
Uh,
who's already
And
done
I
the
would
study.
like to,
we're not talking about black. We ain't talking about kindergarten color crayons right now. We talking about
We're
archaeology.
gonna have to,
So
Aston, because
in
we're gonna
the
have to, Aston.
study of E1B1A, right,
We're gonna
and Ramses,
okay, okay. Do you understand these
I'm not
haplogroups
talking
can
to
appear
you. I'm
in
not talking.
unrelated
I'm not talking
populations
to
yeah,
as
hold
you.
on.
well?
Let Aston speak. Let Aston speak. Go ahead, Aston.
I don't know.
Hey, let me,
The
Well,
the
I
point
think.
was
Go ahead.
Ramses could possibly have E1B1A, right? And let's just say on a whim, the Kadruka sample also has E1B1A. And you remember the old Kadruka samples that were just haplogroup E and they didn't really. What if those was E1B1A? So my idea, instead of trying to argue over if it's E1B1A or not, is to think about the events that could have happened in archaeology that would create the opportunity from E1B1A to come from West Africa and come
but
to the Nile Valley. What did West Africans
Ashton,
contribute?
hold on, Ashton.
What did they contribute
Ashton,
for that to
Ashton,
happen?
that what that I gotta stop you there, brother. Cause you know that you said E1B1A coming from West Africa. That's disingenuous, brother. We know it. We know it did not originate in West Africa. We know that the father.
I didn't say
We
originate.
know that the.
It don't have
We
to
know that the.
originate from there. It can
But
still
we.
come from there.
But the thing of it is, the father and brother, the only relatives of this marker, are in East Africa. You don't find them in West.
Doesn't matter.
But you find E1.
Hey, I got a question for you.
Uh,
Did that sickle cell come from East Africa too?
Yes, it came from
No.
north to northeast Africa. It came from north to northeast Africa, around that region.
The sickle cell?
Yeah.
No, the sickle cell came from the
No,
west.
it didn't, Ashton.
Was it
The
Northwest?
sickle
What
Was
cell?
it
population?
Northwest? Was it Northwest Africa?
Okay, I'm gonna ask the question now. What population you think?
Wasn't it you that kept sharing that article that's talking about sickle cell and it reconstructs it to the Sahara and ties it in with E1B1A? That wasn't you.
That article, that
Didn't
article,
didn't didn't Hassan,
that,
the Sudanese geneticist, publish an article talking about the sickle cell in Sudan came from Central Africa and is related to B2A1A and V88?
the study I'm talking about, the
Yeah.
only,
So for me, I'm gonna think, okay, what did that region of the world contribute to
but
Egypt?
he had,
Watermelon is
but
one.
he had a false premise. That's the thing. The only thing I use that study for is to prove the singular African origin of sickle cell. That's what that study proves to me. But a lot of the shit in there he was saying was unsourced garbage. He mentioned where E1B1A was at. I looked at the source he used to reference that. It didn't mention E1B1A anywhere in that source. That's what he used to say it didn't originate
So
in
you're
East
saying,
Africa.
the study is garbage. Well, we agree on that, FBA Trey. I agree. That study is garbage.
No, the study
Um,
proves that there's
but
a
Aston,
single
you were saying
African origin of sickle cell. But the thing, hold on,
no, but
hold
you
on,
just
hold
said it
on,
was
hold
a
on, hold on,
terrible
hold on, hold on, hold
source.
on, hold on, hold on. So my thing with this sickle cell thing is this: if we're gonna talk about prehistoric migratory events that brought people into different places in Africa, the sickle cell type that's found in pre-dynastic Egypt is benign sickle cell. So we're going to go with the assumption that E1B1A and so-called Niger Congo speakers originated, and I say Niger Congo speakers because they're the primary carriers of the marker. If I'm going to say that they originated in West Africa around that Nigeria-Cameroon border, then what migratory event would have brought the benign haplotype of sickle cell not just into pre-dynastic Egypt, but across the entire Mediterranean? That's a fact. And it goes back to antiquity. So what early events about that West African, so-called West African haplotype into pre-dynastic Egypt, pre-dynastic Upper Egypt, and across the Mediterranean during antiquity? What events? I like my blunt on that.
That's a good question. That's a real good question.
I
That's a
mean,
real good
there's a study
question.
that studies R1B1 V88 in Lebanese Muslims and Christians, right? And so this is the one that they find in the
You gonna
Sahel,
answer the
actually.
question about it?
And what they found was that there was a. Oh, are you just gonna interrupt me?
You interrupted me, nigga. I asked the question.
So what they found was that this is the answer to your question.
Okay.
So what they found what they found was that there's a stronger association between the Sahelian R1B and sickle cell with Muslims, because if you converted to Islam, you could be freed from slavery. And so Lebanese and the Levantine people, they have some sub-Saharan African DNA from the history of the slave trade, and so there is an association between sickle cell and African heritage, right? I I just can't buy this idea that sickle cell all comes from one place. I know Aston believes it. I'm gonna need to see more before I buy into that idea. But to really answer Aston's question, if the ancient Egyptians were Anatolian farmers, I really would need to see the archaeological evidence on that. If that is what the DNA says, that's what the DNA says. So people need to, grab their shovels and find the lost European Atlantis in Egypt,
Yeah.
and show us their the cultural flow from whatever outside of Africa population created Egyptian civilization, and answer like why the cultural substratum of Egypt was found in like the south of Egypt near Nubians, when those people had no such affinities towards Nubians, which is like kind of being suggested by Abusir in 2017, right? If you find similar results in the south of Egypt, well then you have found some Nobel Prize worthy
I,
material.
I don't think that that's true, right? If you go to Ethiopia today and you sample Omatic people, they're gonna have strong Omatic ancestry, right? And then if you go to Beni Shangul, right, on the Blue Nile towards Sudan, they have the Gumans, and they're gonna have a mixture of Omatic and Nilotic. And then you go back, 4,000 years ago, and you have Moda, which is like fully Omatic, Moda Hadza Omatic. And then you go back, really, you saw it like the DNA from like Malawi and stuff. And apparently, going back just 8,000, 10,000 years, there was like a Moda type ancestry all through that region. Now, finding this over and over and over, going back thousands and thousands of years, that does not mean that's the only type of African in Ethiopia. And you could sample other regions, and you would find like Somali-like people.
Okay, but I just, what is this ghost
I
population in
wanna,
Africa that is
I wanna,
similar to Anatolian farm? Who would it be? Like, it would just be a real mystery. It would actually raise more questions than it would answer, in my opinion. If you found that southern Egyptians were not similar to people from the north of Sudan, I would have a lot of questions, because there's already been studies on populations such as the Gumas And the Gumes have seemed, at least according to their haplogroup ratios, to have maintained some ancestry from a more ancient East African or Northeast African population. We've already seen that, right? Maybe it's just slavery. Maybe all of that DNA is just slavery, and that's how we explain any African ancestry ever in the
Nah,
course of
yeah. Why are
19
y'all making it seem like in Egypt you're only gonna get one type of person? Like that makes no
But
sense.
but
What are you
here's something.
talking
But
about? They
hold on,
should be.
hold on.
There should be. Hold up. I am saying, Aston, right? That if you find a marginal amount of ancestry that is connected, right, to northern Sudan, then there had to be some sort of population barrier, some sort of population replacement. There's already been studies about gene flow along the Nile, which has shown that the Nile was a genetic corridor. That was published in like 1999, right? And so
Right.
that would change what we understand about the Nile as genetic corridor. Maybe the Nile was different 3 to 4 thousand years ago, and we need climatologists to get to work, right? And so then we would also have to understand like why is it that so much ancient Egyptian culture was related to Nubian culture, but there was no sort of gene flow between these populations. And then you have to ask, like, okay, so like Nubians came during the New Kingdom and gave this gene flow. Can we also find that in Upper Egypt during this during about like 1500 BC, 1400 BC, 1300 BC, right? There'd be like, just be so many questions to ask, but I don't think that there is going to be a study that has a representative population of all of ancient Egypt. In fact, I think that what people should do is try to find a certain nome or region of Egypt and try to find samples there that you can study over a time period. And then we can compile that stuff together to get a better picture. I don't like this stuff where we're like, okay, let's explore one site here, one site over there, and try to make that a summary of Egypt. I think that that's kind of um, it's not enough. It's like it's getting like a picture of an elephant, right? Like someone fills its trunk, someone fills its legs and whatnot, right? And so maybe what you're describing is that process where we find out about these southern Anatolian ancient Egyptians.
But I would like to
Well,
let's just reiterate.
I guess. Yeah, I guess. I'll describe that picture I put in the jumbotron after Trey.
Got you in a hot second. But I'd like to just kind of go back to that sickle cell thing real quick. So again, we know that it came. We know that it was in pre-dynastic Egypt. You, you know, you say that it originated. Well, you say it originated in West Africa. You got the Benin haplotype. So, what migratory event would explain it? And also, you got 40% of the paternal haplogroup of some southern Egyptian populations belonging to E1B1A. You got another 30% a little further north of the paternal lineage belonging to E1B1A. And then like another 25% in lower Egypt belong to E1B1A. Why do they have such a large percentage of E1B1A if there was no formal interaction? And we know that E1B1A goes back in the region to the dynastic period. So at what migratory event could possibly explain why E1B1A is seen in ancient Egyptians and modern Egyptians? What event?
Um, if I were going off the top of my head, right, and I'll start with the youngest stuff, slavery and the pilgrimage of West Africans into the Middle East, and then you have you going back thousands of years, the transmission of metallurgy, possibly across the Sahel into Sudan and Egypt. If you go back further, you have the introduction of certain crops that ultimately have like wild progenitors in West Africa, certain gourds that went into Egypt, watermelon, cantaloupe,
But
um,
that was more. But
palm.
that was more
Let
so
me
central
finish.
to.
Palm oil, and this is right now. With like the watermelon stuff. Now we're in like pre-dynastic. If you go back further, you have extremely old pottery in Mali. Remember, the homeland of African pottery for the longest time was Mali. It was not anywhere in the Nile Valley, and only recent excavations pushed it, equally, Sudan and Mali. And the Mali pottery, I want to say, is that 9,000 BC, right? So if pottery originated in the West, traveled across to Sudan and then up, that could be a reason. The earliest crops in Egypt are of the Sudanic package. And some of those crops of the Sudanic package, again, have their wild ancestors in West Africa. So, you know, that's another.
Nah,
Now
nah.
we're going back. Now we're
I
going
gotta.
back. Now we at, hold on. Now we are at like 10,000 years ago. This is 10,000 years, 8,000 BC. People in like southern Libya, like where the black mummy comes from, those people were doing agriculture. And that specific type of agriculture comes into Egypt thousands of years before the West Asian agriculture comes into Egypt. People just don't play it up like that because, we came from Fayoum. And so, like
Yeah, but
me, I would think of all those events. If E1B1A is West African and it came into Egypt, all those events I would have in my mind, okay, it could have came here or here or here or here. And I would just go back to, you know, an upper bound limit of when it would have came. I think that's a fair answer.
nah. I have to. I mean, Ashton. Now, every plant you just named, we've all read the Christopher Everett article from 1996. Egypt as an African language. Every plant in the Mesquite you just named almost is attributed to him to Nilo-Saharans or Nilotic Africans. When we talk about that pottery from 9,000 BC, that's the beginning of the Holocene period. And if we look at that one antiquated map of the migration patterns of of Nilotic or Nilo-Saharan speaking Africans, we know that they're in the Upper Nile around the Great Lakes. They took a shortcut through Central Africa, and through Central Africa went north into Lake Megachad, and from there, some like the Songhai went west. And I would make the argument that that's when the Mandate broke off from the Niger Congo branch, and they kind of began to intermingle in that central to western Saharan region. That's why you have Nilotic affinities in Mandate, even though it's somewhat overbearingly Niger Congo. You have some Nilotic affinities in the language and genetically, morphologically, and so with them being Nilotic people, you can't really say that is how you get E1B1A into
Pause. So they
Egypt.
weren't Nilotic. They weren't Nilotic. They were Nilo-Saharan,
Speaking,
right? Number
speaking.
one. Number two, like your whole theory of E1B1A being in the Nile Valley, all those people have languages that reconstruct back to Nilo-Saharan. So, me and you were like in the same boat on that.
Right,
There's
Okay,
there's
right.
other there's
okay, hold
other
Now
on. He's still.
evidence, like
let me.
some of the
Hold on.
some of the
He said
pastoralists.
He said Nilo-Saharan. Okay, the green period means the Sahara is damn near half of fucking Africa. Stop these
Yeah.
fucking games.
Hold on, hold on, hold on,
Well,
hold
Everywhere
on.
is
what are you talking
Nilo-Saharan
about?
Hold
everywhere.
on, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on, y'all. Let's be. It's a podcast, y'all. Let's be peaceful. We got to broadcast this on the sponsors and things, and let's be peaceful, y'all. Respectful.
He's wasting our
I,
time. We
No,
covered
no,
all the
no,
stuff
no, no,
the
no, no,
last
no,
few
no.
weeks.
Let's
what are
not
you talking
let's
about?
not argue. Yo, y'all. Let's please. Uh, but yeah,
I don't understand why that was a point of contention.
I want to
I
say,
don't.
Well, let's just hear what he got to say first. What was you saying, Lou?
The Green Sahara periods, multiple expansions of that that ecosystem, includes half of the landmass of Africa. All the waterways that he's saying are Nilotic or Western African, all of them are connected multiple times for thousands of years. There is no sub-Saharan Africa. There is only the Nile Saharan megalate complex going across the whole damn thing. Like, what are we
So
discussing here?
wouldn't that
All of these
wouldn't
people are
that
connected
create
multiple
the
times.
perfect opportunity for people to
Uh-huh.
travel from the Western Sahara to the Eastern Sahara?
Yes,
But
that's what I've
but
been
but
saying
but
the entire
So
time.
what is your point
yeah.
of contention again?
So let me tell you my point of contention real quick. Let me tell you my point of contention. So again, what I was pointing out was that E1B1A is found in high in modern Egyptians. It's too damn high in modern Egyptians for it to not be explained by some overbearing presence. The Arab slave trade was notorious for neutering male slaves, and that's why we don't see much Bantu DNA across the Middle East like that. Even though we know they took millions of Bantu slaves, they cut their dicks off so that they couldn't reproduce. That's why you don't have any male lineages across the Middle East like that that are African. So that being said, E1B1A in modern Egyptians cannot be explained through the Arab slave trade in that way, because we know they were notorious for doing that. So
So you
again,
arguing
what
that
events?
modern Egyptians have no West African ancestry, basically?
No, what I'm saying is they have E1B1A. Ramses III going back to dynastic Egypt have E1B1A. And as far as modern Egyptians, again, I want to point out 40% of their paternal lineage in some
Right,
cases belong to
right. They have
E1B1A.
E1B1A.
So
And so I was trying to
so
think
that
of
being said,
what events could have brought it there.
40%.
40
There are
40%.
some studies, yeah,
Indigenous
40%.
40%,
status brought it there. That's
yes.
the event.
I'm sorry. Wait a second.
40%.
Wait, hold up. Let's pause. 40%.
But no, he's literally playing dumb. Indigenous status gave them that huge percentage. It's obvious.
Yes,
What are you not understanding? If the Bantu are
yes.
expanding across half of Africa using just the waterways on the Mega Lake Chad region, that means they're in Egypt. 15,000 BC, the Yellow Nile, the Blue Nile, the White Nile, all of them are Bantu. E1B1 should be exactly where it is, and that's where it is. What are you confused about?
So is that not what I just
40%.
said?
I just haven't.
I don't
I have.
understand like your understanding and comprehension. That's what I just said.
So you're saying you're confirming that the black people were indigenous to Egypt,
Oh my
right?
God. Oh my
So
God.
what?
I
I
can't I
got you.
I
can't
I
just
do
got
need a
you.
this.
yes or I just need a yes or
I
I
no.
got
can't
you.
do
Hold on, hold
this.
on, hold on, hold on.
I can't do
I got you,
this.
but let
Black
me.
Africans.
Hold on,
You
Let me
said
land. Let me
people
land.
talk
Finish
about
what I'm
hold on,
gonna
let me
say.
just say this. People talk about E1B1A in Egypt. And I just gave like 12,000 years of history on how it could have arrived. And I'm getting accused of saying it wasn't there. Like, what's wrong with people?
But
Oh,
what I'm
okay, well
saying
go
though.
ahead
But what
and
I'm.
confirm that because we can't assume that you're agreeing with us.
Let me reel it back real quick. All right. So again, if you look at the origin and dispersal of E1B1A, I've Google map of the origin of E1B1A and the dispersal. It is always coming from the Sudan, not Libya, not Chad. It's coming from the Sudan or southern Egypt, either northern Sudan or southern Egypt. Always.
Or Uganda.
I've never.
Yeah,
I've
I
seen.
mean
I've seen it,
you right. But you got to
but
remember,
that's.
remember that thing we talk
But
about white people's laziness, right? When you see like a migration or an
but
origin of
this is
modern
not. Hold on.
humans,
Hold on. 1 second. 1 second.
go ahead.
Because this. Because this is not. Because what I'm pointing out. This is not. This is the opposite of laziness. Like this is. I mean, and I'm not trying to like brag or talk shit, but I mean like this stuff is not pointed out to us. Like this is very obvious things that I think should really have very big implications on how we view this. But these white scholars are not going to point this stuff out to us. I mean, again, I mean, E1B1A at 40% in modern Egyptians. That needs now you gave some events, you listed some stuff, but nothing that you gave can satisfy that. On top of the fact that it's continuity to a degree, because you find it in dynastic Egyptian royalty. So we're talking about continuity. That seems to be
But
it.
again, if people left West Africa and came across bringing E1B1A and sickle cell, wouldn't they still persist with E1B1A in modern Egyptians? I don't understand what the disconnect is.
But my question is though, there's no archaeological evidence whatsoever of a migration from. And when I say West Africa, I'm not talking about Chad. I'm not talking about Niger. I'm not talking about Mali. I'm talking about where they say everybody came from. That Nigerian, Cameroonian forest
Yeah,
belt
but
region.
those people
That's
weren't.
what I'm
Those
talking
people
about.
weren't. They weren't in. Well, those people weren't even in the forest
So
belt
then
at
what
that
would we
time,
had then?
right? So really, we're talking about the
But
ancestors of West
hold on.
Africans.
They were hold up.
Right.
So if you're looking for actual quote unquote Niger Congo speakers, right?
Mhm.
Apparently, and I was reading a whole article about the
Yeah, when's he
Oanians.
gonna say he
And hold up,
agrees that the black
hold
people are
up,
the indigenous
hold
pop?
up, hold up. I was reading a whole article about the Oanians, right? And
Or when's he gonna say that he agrees
I
that?
didn't even know what this culture was, right? I was like, who are the Oanians? Who are they, right? There's a paper called "The Evolution of Foraging," um, and the transition towards agriculture, I believe. Hold up, let me search for it. But anyways, in this paper, they use pottery and um, harpoons to map different cultures to like Nilo-Saharan languages, right? But they say that the Kithians of Fez to occupants of Gobero would possibly have spoken a Nilo-Saharan language. We already know this, right? But similarly, the Oanian culture of Mauritania, with its striking arrow points, can be identified with Niger-Congo hunting populations. Blanch 2006 points out that both bow and arrow can be reconstructed in Niger-Congo, which points to an intricate coevolution of fisher, forager, and land-based hunters during the early Holocene. So those people were in Northwest Africa. They weren't necessarily in Egypt, so maybe there could have been gene flow between these different North African populations. In fact, there likely was. That led to E1B1A sneaking into Egypt.
But my thing is this though, brother. Like I mean, with such a, I mean, again, I don't think that y'all are really seeing the significance in this and how we need. Okay, when we talk about the Bantu migration, for example. When we talk about, so everything that y'all are bank, you are putting 100% of your eggs in the Bantu migration described by Greenberg. So let's follow that model. Let's follow that model. Let's not deviate from it because apparently that's gospel to y'all. So when we talk about this model, the model goes from it does originate in the Sudan. Yes, it does. And Effort says that. Niger Congo. Now, again, Ashton, Effort says that Niger Congo originated in the Sudan. And I'll post a text in a minute.
It did
So so why dispute that E1B1A originated there too? Why? Why
because
dispute
ain't no
that?
E1 because ain't no E1B1A in the Sudan. We went over this already. Remember, I said
Well,
produce a sample, one sample of
but Sudan,
E1B1A in modern
but that's a
Sudanese.
200-year construct though. But Sudan, when I talk about Sudan, I'm talking
Yeah,
about
but
that general vicinity. I'm talking about that general Egypt
uh,
Sudan vicinity. I'm not talking about
yeah, but it ain't. But it ain't.
modern
But it ain't.
British. I'm not talking about modern. I'm not talking about modern British constructs. I'm not. I'm not talking
But
about that.
you
I'm
would
talking about
think.
the
But you would
vicinity
think.
of now.
You would think though, if it originated in that general area, some of the modern people from that general area would have it. And under what circumstances is it found in 40% of Southern Egyptians and 0% of Northern Sudanese, who are mixed with Southern Egyptians or almost like the same people? Some would argue.
Oh, you
Hmm,
would say they're like the same people, so it would just
some
be
people
weird
would.
to find out that they're Anatolian. That'd be a shocker to
You
me. But
goofy, Bodie. But what I'm saying though is okay. So following the Greenberg model of the Bantu migration, it says verbatim from the Sudan they went across the Sahelian
That's not
Savannah belt.
Bantu. That's not
No,
Bantu.
I'm not talking. Wait. No, I'm not talking. I'm getting into. I'm talking about the parent Niger Congo group. That parent Niger Congo group that it broke off of. It came from the Sudan. Yes, it came from the Sudan, and it went across the Savannah belt into what is southern Nigeria and northern Cameroon. That is the basis of the origin of the Niger Congo family. Now, when we get into the Bantu migration, this is what's even dumber. This is what's even dumber about that. So West Africa is home to, as far as sub-Saharan Africa, is home to most of the advanced states of quote unquote sub-Saharan Africa. even going back to the Nox civilization, doesn't it seem like some of the Bantus, as far as societal and technological development, aside from steel, I mean iron, doesn't it seem like their societies almost didn't bring that same level of technology into southern, central, and eastern Africa where they went to? And with that, being a notable observation, how do you go from a more advanced state to less technically advanced states? Culturally advanced, of
Slavery.
course. No, because no, that's not because
I'm
we know that
speaking
the
to
Bantus
us.
have a you goofy. No, I'm talking about you goofy. My bad. But no, I mean, they just the, I'm just saying it doesn't make sense. So following this Bantu migration, of course, you got the people coming from the Sahel, straight into that northern Cameroon, southern Nigerian region. Where does that lead the Niger Congo speaking Mandate people? There is no explanation for how this people who are supposedly a branch of Niger Congo, how did that core population go straight into Nigeria and northern Cameroon, and nothing broke off to go into that region? I mean, it's just so much craziness about it.
How
But
about this? How about this? Right? How about this? Um,
right.
there's an idea that a lineage like M78, which is strong in Egypt, originates in the Eastern Sahara or the Egyptian region, Northeast Africa, and it traveled everywhere from there. There's an alternative idea that maybe it's Northwest African because they got the Ibero-Mauritian skeleton that's like 15,000 years old, and it has it, and it doesn't look like it has Northeast ancestry. It's like strong Northwest African. So maybe Egyptians got it from Northwest Africans. So those are two competing theories for the same lineage. One originated in the Northeast, one originated in the Northwest. So with E1B1A, it's kind of the same thing. One theory is, it split off. M329 stayed in Ethiopia, and the other one went north into Egypt, over to the west, and then south. That's one theory. The other theory is it split off from Ethiopia, traveled through the Sahel, or somewhere through sub-Saharan Africa, and like spread west with like L2 and L3B or whatever. So those are two theories. They both
Spread
valid.
spread through
I don't really have to
it.
argue over either one. But my whole point is, if you're saying it's coming from the west, then it's good to have like some type of archaeology to back your argument. And I
So they
was
saying
trying
what's
to
coming from the west?
provide.
Hold on.
Hold on. He still said sub-Saharan Africa. There is no sub-Saharan Africa. There's only Central Africa connecting every other part of Africa. They
If it's
all go
coming
through
from
Central
Western
Africa.
Africa, okay. If it's coming
Yeah,
from Western
west to
Africa,
central, central to east,
if it's coming from
central
West
to
Central
north,
Africa or the West or
central to south.
wherever it's coming from,
Yeah, the Bantu, the Megalite Chad peoples are Bantu. Cameroon, Nigeria, Chad. Those are all Bantu cultures. What are you not understanding?
if it's coming from there, then it's good to have some archaeology because somebody's going to ask you, what were they eating? Who brought it? What culture? What was their tools kit? What did their pottery look like? And I want you guys to know that shit. Otherwise, you're just
Yeah,
going to be
and I
like
want to,
talking
yeah,
and you don't
but
really know.
right, right, and I want to mention something about archaeology as well. So presumably, according to Effort, now I mean, let's just follow the Niger Congo family that mainstream Effort put out there, right? Right. Effort says Niger Congo family originated in Sudan or Nubia around 12,000, and he said it broke away around and headed west around 12,000 BC. That's what he says. That's the date given. He says the late Pliocene is when it started to head west, right? So that's the bulk of the family. This is the ancestors of the largest group of Africans today. Why don't you have any archaeological evidence dating back past what 2 6,000 year old pygmy bones in Cameroon? Why don't you have any hard archaeological evidence of heavy human occupation in that region until after 2000 BC.
Lou, go
If
on
there
mute
was
real quick.
such, if there
Because
was,
those people were more northern.
but no, effort says they came across the Sahelian belt from Sudan straight into that Nigeria, Cameroon region. What
Well, maybe
archaeological
Aaron is
point?
wrong.
No. For example, when we look at the archaeological maps of the settlements of Egypt during the desiccation phase, when they go through the four phases, the early Holocene, mid Holocene, late Holocene, and the end of, well, we still in the Holocene, but you know what I mean. And it's showing the graduating green and deserting of the region. When we look at the settlements, it goes from East Africa to West Africa. They're showing all the settlements of human beings. I, I would say no. During the early Holocene, right before this happened, 100% of the settlements in the area, 100%, and you know this, were clustered along that Nubian southern Egyptian region. 100% of the settlements.
Yep.
Where does that leave the Niger Congo speaker? Because you don't see anything in West Africa. Now post the map. You don't see anything
That's
in
not
West Africa.
true. You do see stuff in there.
Does it substantiate the parent population of the most widespread population across the second most populated continent on Earth? It does
You
not.
got to do the work. You
Numerically,
got to
it
do
does
the
not.
work. You got to
No,
do the work. I'm telling
Ashton,
you, you
there's no
got to do the work.
archaeological evidence of these people
You
there
got to,
at this
if you
time.
haven't read it, then you don't know about it. And so you have to do the work.
So then why
That's
do they
all I'll say.
suggest? But the thing is, Ashton, it's been noted
Man,
many
these
a
people are
times.
lazy. They're
I'm not talking about these
lazy.
people. I'm
But
talking about it's been
that's where
noted
you're getting the
many.
information from.
I'm getting it from various sources, and I'm using my own logic behind it. Okay, it's been noted too many times that the oldest findings in the forest belt of West Africa are pygmies. There is no Bantu
That's
skeleton in
not
that
true.
region. There's no Negro.
That's not that's oh okay.
Is
And
there
what's the point?
okay? And I would say if you found a skeleton there that matched, is that enough to substantiate a population or no, the parent group of the largest population in Africa today? Is is finding one or two skeletons there? Is that going to substantiate that? Are there any large
You
settlements
missing
of
the
people there?
point. Those people didn't originate there. That's where they are
That's
now.
what I'm
So
saying.
you talk
No,
about their
but
ancestors and where their ancestors come
yes,
from.
yes, but from a timestamp perspective, efforts model that y'all are following as God makes zero sense from an archaeological standpoint because there's no archaeological evidence of the parent group of the largest population in Africa today going across this region at this time. We know they took the route. We know eventually they made that migration. But at this late Pleistocene time, there is zero evidence of this. But again, y'all make this the gospel. And that's why I think that's lazy. I think that's very lazy because it's too many holes in that theory. Hell, even genetically, nothing supports that. Hell, that Chum Laka study shitted on the Bantu migration. It absolutely shitted on it. And then there's another study about pottery and the Bantu migration. Just came out in 2019. It shits on the dates. It says the Bantu migration cannot be possible based on the amounts and the dating of this pottery. I can post that article, just came out. So you have multiple forms of archaeology, you have genetics, you have anthropology, all debunking this shit. But why is it the gospel? I think that's laziness. Or it's the fear of being ridiculed by people who are lying and have power. But to sit here as intelligent people and say that there's no problem with this theory that y'all keep holding up as the stone God truth that Joseph Greenberg wrote, I think that's intellectually lazy as hell. My opinion.
Yeah, and this is Lucifer. I don't believe it's laziness. I believe it's malice. There's no way hundreds of thousands of experts, generation after generation, had privileged access to all these archives, all these samples, all these fossils, and came to the conclusion that these people have come to. There's no way. If we so much as get random strangers with no experience in archaeology and you give them three fossils, they'll come up with a more coherent pattern recognition than all these scholars and experts and professors. So at some point, you got to just go Occam's razor on that bitch. These people are hostile and they're doing it on purpose.
You know what
Agreed
y'all
on that
should
last
do?
part. Yeah,
You
go
know
ahead
what
on
y'all should
purpose.
do? My suggestion is to have a blog where you type out in detail, what your position is on certain things. And so you can have yourself, on record and people can sort of read and source what you're talking about. Because it's kind of, we could all say it here and yeah, that's great. But, somebody they went to www.fbatrade.com and saw it and you roll it out like all eloquently, that's what you got to do.
But
Unless
you
you
know,
plan on
So
going to
Chaz,
so you
school for a
hold on
long
now.
time
Oh, hold on.
and
So
reading a bunch of books.
you're saying real history worldwide, a person in your field who is an expert on genetics has not already done what you just said to do.
No, no, that site is trash.
Okay, state
If I
how it's
copy
trash.
text from that
State how
site
it's trash.
and put it into one of those
He
sites that
cites
analyze the education that you need to be able to read it, it's gonna come up as like third or fourth grade.
he cites the studies, highlights his conflict with the studies, and then posts other studies that show
Okay.
exactly why
All
he
right, yeah,
conflicted with it.
okay. All right, okay, it's not trash. It's just not that eloquently done. And it doesn't pass like
What what's the
the
lack of
mustard,
eloquence?
man.
I read a lot of that
Aston,
site
are you
and I
Post
didn't
post the
find
link.
besmirching the
any lack of
Post the
character
link.
eloquence.
of
Post the link, and
PhD
I'll show
Dr.
you what's wrong
Clyde
with it. Post the link.
Winters?
Yes, Clyde Winters.
Oh, of course it's him. Oh my God.
Like this is like, man, people have to start off with like regular science and regular archaeology first before they move to that alternative bullshit. If you start off on alternative bullshit, you're just gonna be on bullshit.
Alternative
Like your
bullshit.
entire hobby is gonna be bullshit.
Okay,
You
so
like
what
it's
do you
like a
call
cake pan, right?
okay, so you said it
It's
was
like a cake
alternative.
pan
You
that
said it
has a
was
dent in it.
alternative. Okay. Okay,
And
so
every
what do you consider
oh god,
Eurocentrism, which is now being revised by
it's
every single
bullshit.
new finding?
It's bullshit. But
Okay,
that don't
so
mean you have to write
Eurocentrism
that.
Eurocentrism is bullshit and has been debunked by genome mapping in the last 20 years. That's confirmed. That's a fact. Are you agreeing with that
You,
statement?
yes, but you can't fight bullshit with more bullshit. You
It's
just
not
sting up the
bullshit.
whole
It's
room.
we're fighting the bullshit with what the genome mappings found.
No, okay, man.
So
You
so
know
you're
what?
saying the Green Sahara period had no influence on African evolution nor migration throughout
Who
intercontinental
said
Africa.
that? Who said that?
That's what you're
I
implying
just
because you
said
haven't agreed with
no.
us.
I just said people migrated from the Green Sahara, from the Western Sahara to the Eastern Sahara. What are you
Hmm.
talking about?
And back and forth multiple
This is
times
why I
for
got you
longer than
blocked because like your reading
back
and
and forth
comprehension and your
multiple
understanding it
times.
just
Back and
fail, and it's
back.
like I don't know
Hold
if
on,
you dumb
you
or
still
you
haven't
trolling.
agreed with the paradigm shift. That Green Sahara satellite mapping undoes all this assumption that evolution and migration is one way out of Africa. Okay, it is
What are you
happening within
talking
Africa.
about?
It's happening back and forth from outside of Africa, but there are no white people coming back in. That's what the genome mapping is showing. Hey, there's no Kazakhstan OCA markers coming back in. That means
So why are
there's
they
no
found
white
in
Africans.
Morocco 5,000 years ago?
What did they find in Morocco 5,000 years ago?
White
Another African
genes,
albino?
light skin genes,
Yeah, from an African albino or from a
not an
Kazakhstan albino?
albino, the European derived type light skin genes. You didn't
Uh
know
huh.
this?
No, I did not know
You
that.
didn't know this?
No, I did not know that because the Anglo Arabs would be rubbing that in our faces if they
Have
had that.
you? Oh man, no, they won't because the older skeletons are black. They have the dark skin ancestral state. Like these are like the basics you got to know. You have to read the ancient DNA studies on North Africa. You go on, and then you read that, and you be like, okay, yeah, 5,000 years ago they got white genes, and then you should never, ever, ever say that
When you
white genes are new.
when you say white genes, you're saying a pale gene within Africa,
I'm saying
5,000 years ago.
the derived light skin genes, right?
Okay,
That
which
characterize those
defect
light
was it?
skinned people. That
Okay, so which
derived
defect was it?
gene.
SL8, SLC,
Yeah, that
SNX,
one.
found on
Yeah, that
Khoisan.
one. That
Uh,
one.
hey, hold on, whoa! There's like 8 or 9 of these bastards.
Well, you're
There's
gonna
a
have to
lot of
read
them.
the study, my friend. You're gonna have to
Hey,
read.
let me.
But
You're gonna
but
have
Hey,
to
let me.
read.
Hey, one second.
but
One
that's
second.
what I'm
One second.
saying.
One second.
There's so many albinistic
I mean,
that is
ask this
relevant to
question
Abusir.
verbatim. Then.
They're dropping these haplogroup names. They're not pointing out which specific gene marker came from what lineage. So you can have internal albinistic lineages within Africa that they're calling
That's not
Arabs
how it
or
works.
calling
That's
Asians
not
or
how it
calling
works.
Central Eurasians.
Listen,
Like,
white
no,
DNA does not
stop doing
correlate
that
with
shit.
light
It's
skin,
annoying.
bro.
You have inbreeding in Africa producing an
Listen,
amplification
there are
of pale
literally
genes
aboriginals who
within
have the same who
African
have the same
populations.
paternal
They're not
lineages,
even
but are
outsiders,
not
but they
the
can just
same.
toss them into a different haplogroup because, oh, they have
Uh,
several matching gene
hold on.
markers for a different haplogroup. Like, so? Do they have a melanin gene as well? Oh, yeah, they do. Okay, then. Melanin dominance and genetic expression says they're going to be black. How do we know that? We have black people today, whole tribes of them across Africa with those white derived markers, and their melanin gene is still dominant, and they express as black people in Africa.
Right. Right.
That's why I brought up the
Right. The
R1
Thames, and then you
haplogroup.
talking about
Hold on.
you talking about how the East African Bantus have more diversity of their marker than so-called white people.
Exactly. All the pale genes arose in Africa first. That's the only reason white people even have them to amplify.
Right.
So it's ridiculous. This whole conversation is utterly pointless. They
Well,
don't
hold
want to
on, bro.
specify, is this a Kazakhstan albino or not? Because that is the only white gene they can use to say this person is white or derived from a white person or a white lineage. They do not ever specify that particular set of gene markers. Therefore, I don't take their opinion when they say, oh, there's white people in Africa too. It's like, no, that's a black person with some defective genetics. Deal with it. That'll be a black or a pale negroid, or even a pale
But
mongoloid.
you saying all this, and you haven't read the study, right? So you running at
It
the
doesn't
mouth,
matter what's in the
and
study. You said it
you
was
didn't know about the
5,000
specimen,
BC.
and you haven't read the study.
Hold on. Here's where it doesn't matter. 5,000
Hold on.
No,
BC.
Hold on.
That's a
Hold on, Lou.
thousand years.
Hold on, Lou. Hold on for the room because we want to transition this. I think we're pretty much done. As far as the straightforward portion of the Abusir study, so I think it's the right time to transition it over to the rapid fire.
Get the ball rolling a little bit. What's going on, Dwayne?
Yeah, not much. Yeah, sorry about that. I've never actually used the space before. I don't even use the app on my phone.
Right. I'm like, yeah.
Oh, so
To
I've
use the
just been
Twitter.
listening the whole time.
Oh, you were listening? Yeah. No, that's good, definitely. So yeah, I mean, let's get it started. I mean, Dwayne, let's introduce yourself to the audience. Why not?
All right, Dwayne Wong Omwale. I'm a Pan-African activist, scholar that published several books on the history of African people, both on the continent and the diaspora.
Absolute. And for those who don't know, my name is Marak, owner of Marak Auras, host of podcast, Straight Facts. I do have a master's in psychology as well. So yeah, we just want to get this started. So I mean, Dwayne.
Let's go, nigga.
Okay, yes,
Yeah.
Dwayne is well published, and so am I. So we got some credentials here. What's going on
And
here?
I'm Trey.
And that's my co-host Trey as well. That's in the building.
All right.
Um, all right. I mean, let's just start off from the beginning, right? Let's just go to not the beginning. I want to at least address what you talk about the most, which is the arrival of these Spaniards that came to America in 1492, right?
Yeah.
After the exile of the Moors. You want to speak on some of that history?
I mean, I didn't think this was going to be relevant to the debate, but there's really not much to speak on here. I mean, you said it yourself, after the
No?
Moors were exiled, the Spanish came to the Americas and really kicked off the whole process of European colonialism.
Well, I think it's relevant only because of the very fact that it's relevant for me. So in 1492, the same year they exiled the Moors from Spain, they used the intellectual property and the of the Moors, and they used their boats and everything else to travel over to the Americas, including a well-documented one named Pedro Alfonso Pedro Nino, over to the Americas to help him navigate over to America. So this expedition was important because of the very fact that in Columbus's own journal and reporting of the Americas, he was able to get translation that said that the natives said that they have gotten spears from the
Okay.
south and the southeast.
Can I cut you
So
off
go ahead.
right there?
Yep, you sure can.
Okay, that actually wasn't in Columbus's journal. That was in Bartolomeo de las Casas. And that's one of the reasons why I've been so critical of Van Sertima, because a lot of people who listen to his lectures and read his books don't realize that he actually got that wrong. If you check Columbus's journals, you won't find that in there. That wasn't in Columbus's journal.
So the very fact that it is repeated and codified throughout scholarship makes all the difference here, doesn't it?
I mean, what's repeated and codified by scholarship?
That very sentiment that it was translated that they had gotten those spears from Africans from the south and the southeast is all
Okay.
throughout
Have you
scholarship.
read Bartolomeo de las Casas's journal? Because he didn't say anything about Africa writing about the spears. So you have to go to the primary
scholar.
What's that?
So the primary source would be the fact that scholars are repeating.
Scholars are not a primary source. The primary source is Bartolomeo de las Casas. And if you read his
But I
journal,
didn't say that. What I said was that the very fact that scholars are repeating it makes the entire
which
point for
scholar?
peer review.
Van Sertima?
So we're talking about Harvard has repeated
Harvard
it
is
with
not a
Leo
scholar. Which
Weiner
scholar?
as well.
Harvard is not a scholar.
I
Which
said
scholar?
Harvard with Leo Weiner
Okay.
had repeated it as well. These can be found all throughout JSTOR as well. I can post some.
But none of
them
those
in
are
the
primary
video.
sources. I'm giving you the primary source, so you have to go to the primary source. If you go to the primary source, you'll find Bartolomeo de las Casas said nothing about African spears. That's something that was added after.
So a bunch of scholars just going around lying for what purpose? To repeat it over and over.
Scholars do that all the time. That's why I'm asking you which scholar. You know, for a fact, scholars have different agendas, and scholars do twist information, which is why primary sources are so important. And in this situation, the primary source is what I'm giving you. Bartolomeo de las Casas. You could check the journals. It doesn't say anything but African spears.
Okay, well, that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and look into him so we can do that as a primary source. The very fact that it's being vetted over and over again, though, I don't see how that's really making your point here.
Vetted by whom, though? See, the thing is, you keep going back to these scholars. I'm trying to get to a conversation about primary sources. And to me, that's usually the issue, these type of conversations, that you're debating from the standpoint of using secondary sources and scholars. My work is based on primary sources. Primary sources being the actual Europeans who wrote these things in the journals. And I mean, as I said, the fact that you're relying on these secondary sources is why you even got the information wrong. Because if you go and actually read Columbus's journal, Columbus doesn't say anything about the spears.
Well, it's been already repeated through Oxford as well.
Doesn't make it, but see, that's a fallacy, though. It doesn't matter if Oxford could repeat it and it's still wrong. That's why you have to go to the primary source.
Post it because yeah, but I highly doubt that you would make an argument there and for that to be the main source of purpose for everybody to be completely wrong on that particular topic when everybody's vetting the same.
Who's everybody? You keep using these vague terms like scholars and everybody.
So again, you know how dissertations work, don't you, Dwayne?
I do. Also, do you know how primary sources work?
So-
And you are aware of the fact that simply because a dissertation is published doesn't mean everything in a dissertation is factually correct.
Right, but when it's repeated and everybody's finding the same
But you keep saying
evidence,
everybody. You're pretending as if Van Sertima
people who are publishing.
Yeah, and people who publish have published criticisms of Van Sertima as well. So you can't hide behind the fact that this information is published.
Well, let's get to Van Sertima. Who the hell? Who is really debunking?
You've never read a criticism of Van Sertima?
Who?
Van Sertima himself, he in Early America Revisited, that whole book was a response to his critics.
Who's the critics?
I don't have the names on hand, but I'm directing you to his book where he was responding to his critics, so you can go read for yourself what Van Sertima said to his critics. But the fact is, he has a lot of
his work would be discredited if it is literally been repeated and documented within the Sage article Encyclopedia of America. So how much of a damn quack could he be?
Got you. Now, my thing is, before I go all out and supporting the theory, for a long time, I was opposed to the Olmec theory when I was on Egypt Search with Ashton for years, until about 2013. I just really scuffed over it. And, it was just kind of like, okay, whatever. But, as I started seeing white people just feverishly deny the Egyptians were black, I said, what the fuck else are they lying about? So I started doing my digging, and I do it the Egypt Search way. They're very critical of anything you say on there. You can't just go in there and say anything. Ask Ashton in the chat. You can't just go in there and say anything. But you got people who've been making these arguments. They got Clyde Winters now. I know people got their hang-ups on him and whatnot, but one of the things that really, really stuck with me as far as tangible biological evidence was the finding of sickle cell in the ancient Mayans. And I put the study in the Jumbotron. There should be a direct source, so you can check that out. But this was something noted by Ivan Van Sertima. But further research on sickle cell. This is why it's some damning evidence. People who say it's not, Anyway, so in the third slide from the left, third slide from the left, I posted an excerpt from a study from 2018, either 2018 or 2020, about the Green Saharan origins of sickle cell. And of course, the early Holocene, that's the Green Sahara, between 10 and 6,000 BC. And during this period, you see a commingling of different Africans. You see a commingling of people who are no longer in Africa to even have the mutation in the first place. But what this study does is it pinpoints the origin, the single origin, because you have different haplotypes. You have Benin, you have Bantu, you have Senegalese haplotypes of sickle cell. But despite those different haplotypes, you have one common ancestor. And that ancestor is not 10,000 years old. It's only about 7,000 years old. It goes back to 5,000 BC. Now, that's interesting, of course, because we know that, pre-dynastic Egyptian mummies, in Upper Egypt, were found to have been in sickle cell, which, I make the argument that, Niger-Congo speakers were in that part of Africa at the time. But with that being said, sickle cell is associated with the Niger-Congo family. It's associated with people carrying for the most part, E1B1A. And you also see a contingency of it in India, which, I argue that they too have a recent African origin. I don't know how many people won't go with that, but I stand with it. But as far as the Mayans are concerned, I posted the study in it says the first slide in Jumbotron, and the ancient Mayans were found to have sickle cell. Now, how do you know if a skeleton has sickle cell or not? Well, there are these lesions. Mm-hmm. There are these ghastly lesions that you find on the bones of people with sickle cell. And that was apparent in some of the Mayan samples. So with that, I think it's pretty cut and dry that there definitely was some African contact, and that's genetic evidence during pre-colonial America. Would you say that, Dwayne?
Well, okay, so the thing is, my position has never actually been to deny that there was any contact whatsoever. And Van Sertima actually, he mentions a European writer, Peter Martyr, who actually wrote that he believed that there were Africans who shipwrecked in the Americas. So my position has never been that there was absolutely no contact. It certainly is possible that Africans did make contact. My position is most of the arguments that Van Sertima makes are very flawed because, as I said, going back to primary sources, he doesn't rely on primary sources to make his arguments. So there's a lot of fallacies and flaws in his argument for that reason. And my other argument is that I think a lot of people overestimate or exaggerate the amount of Africans who already would have been in the Americas prior to the slave trade. And then what ends up happening is a lot of people start claiming that they're not descendants of enslaved Africans, they're descendants of Black people who were already in the Americas before slavery. And the fact is, again, when you check the primary sources, most Black people who were enslaved in the Americas didn't claim that they were indigenous. They recognized that they were people who either came from the African continent or descendants of people from the African continent. So it's never been my position that there wasn't any contact. I just think a lot of the arguments around the supposed contact are flawed, and I think there's a lot of exaggerations.
Well,
I got you.
hold on,
But
really quickly. Hold on, Trey, real quickly, because he did. I already knew reading his blogs that where he stood on his position. I already knew he said that where he felt about the contact before the transatlantic slave trade was about us already being here as well. But to the very point of it is that who is really debunking and making real points of debunk for or against Van Sertima?
yeah, and I would also like to point out with Ivan Van Sertima, there's a lot of confusion about what the hell he actually wrote, man. It's and it is some people who are, on the whole, we don't have nothing to do with Africa tip or whatever, but at the same time, it's a lot of people who don't like him, who they really get his argument real funky, man. They really do. And I'm gonna post it in Jumbotron again.
And some of the first people to even talk about it were a lot of native people to South America. And I wanted to know who is debunking Van Sertima? Who gave credence to that? Debunk.
What do you mean give credence?
But
Debunked Van Sertima, because I have plenty of people who actually give him credibility.
Yeah, but it sounds like you're trying to make an argument for authority, though. The issue isn't who gives credence or who debunks it. The issue should be the arguments that he made and whether or not they're valid and can be proven. It sounds like you're trying to make an authority argument there.
Well, the authority comes from because who is really going around and giving peer credibility to the debunk of Van Sertima?
And that's my point. That it seems like you want to make an argument for authority. My position
what would be the agenda otherwise?
Because my position on Van Sertima is his arguments can't stand on their own, and the fact is you're not even defending the arguments. You're trying to make an authority.
No. This is just one point. First of all, Dwayne, let's be clear, because I'm only playing with you right now. I'm really playing with you right now because I'm not even really going to the real grit.
So then stop playing. Stop wasting my time and get serious, then.
Okay, let's get serious because Black people.
Yeah, where do you invite me here to play?
Absolutely, because Black people are indigenous here into America, and you know how we know that is through every metric imaginable. So if we really wanted to get down to it, Harvard actually put out a study talking about the founding populations of America. And did you read that study that Harvard and CBI and a lot of other people had?
No, because like I said, I do my research based on primary sources. I don't know why you keep going to secondary sources like Harvard.
Right. There's no secondary sources here. People have already did.
You said Harvard. Harvard is not a primary source.
So you're basically negating academia and how it stands in standard to how we go about evidence. These are people going about evidence, right? Is that either correct or incorrect?
No, it's not. You're really confused here because how you do the evidence is based on a primary source. So you're giving me Harvard as a source.
Okay, but who says that it wasn't a primary source? That's the point.
Is Harvard a primary source?
Yes, when they repeat it, yes. Harvard, NCBI, all these.
Harvard is the primary source with pre-Columbian America?
Yes, because they're studying genetics, they're doing methodological measurement.
Do you understand what a primary source is?
Sir, how does academia work? How do dissertations work? Are people just going around repeating what? What are they repeating?
That's what I'm asking you because
if they're doing the actual studies and repeating the actual evidence, what the hell is happening?
What is the evidence? That's what I mean. I can't.
What is happening? The fact that you don't have an opposition, it makes my entire point. Do you have an opposition? What's the primary opposition then?
primary opposition to what? You're the one that came here wanting to debate me. So if anything, you were the opposition to
Sir,
what I wrote. So I'm trying to figure out what
I'm
exactly is your
getting
issue with my articles
I'm
that you
getting
want to
down
debate.
to, were black people indigenous to America?
Yeah, my argument is no.
And post the opposition.
What's up about opposition?
What source are you speaking for that would even codify anything you would say that says you're not?
Black people themselves who wrote about their experiences in slavery.
Oh my God. Are you serious?
That's the primary source. So you're telling me you take Harvard's word over the black experience in America rather than black people who wrote slave narratives about their own situation? Is that what you're saying?
First of all, you're not Black American. Let's get that clear. Let's make that
Yeah,
very
that's why I'm not using myself as the primary source. I came here with primary sources, and apparently you came to.
You're not a Black American. You don't know what we have in oral tradition as
Okay,
far as carrying
so
on
the thing is, you're
how
not.
we live. Furthermore, Black Americans weren't really classifying themselves, and to be enumerated as Indian, there was a set of rules in place, such as Indians not taxed are to be enumerated, the families of Indians who have renounced tribal rule, and who under state or territory laws exercise the rights of citizens are to be enumerated. Also, dependent on who you may live amongst. If you lived amongst blacks, you were likely to be classified black, or living amongst Indians or whites could change your classification. That is further codified by the actions of Walter Plecker, who was so concerned over black people in Virginia passing as white or Native American that he committed paper genocide to classify everyone Negro along with the one drop rule. So that literally makes no sense in and of itself.
Yeah, but you're not a Central American then. So by that argument,
I didn't say Central American. I'm a Black American.
Yeah. So the thing is, if you're not a Central American, why are you in a position?
This isn't just about Central America, though. This is about North America as well.
Hold on. Y'all put my 10-4 kufi on. The Mayans disappeared. Just like a Hokie had disappeared. They went up north to the southeast. That's the big secret.
So, I mean, and Trey, you are making a point here, but the very fact that he doesn't really he came here, and I did want to at least have an argument that led to this, but he just wanted to just shoot the shit and go straight for the jugular. I'll do that anyway. I don't really debate. So if you really have the sources to really combat the fact that there is indigenous claim to black people in America, if you don't really have that argument here, you're really the one wasting time here. As a matter of fact, Yale just put out a
Yale.
Yes, they did actually.
I would also, yeah. My bad. Go ahead, my rock.
Yale put out a publishing. I didn't even get to really go through it, but as far as it's called Unraveling Black Indigeneity in America, and that's just one as of recently. But go ahead, Trey. I'm gonna post them in Tron.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a whole heap of shit that just really links. Particularly, I'm more on the Nile Valley diffusion argument. Perhaps some mandate within the last couple of 100 years, but I stick to them guns on that. When you see things in America like the crock and the flail, crock and the flail, that's a central theme of nothing but Egyptian religion. That's not like there's only Egyptian religion as far as that's concerned. There's nothing similar. There's only people who carry the culture from being there. But when you see an Osirian crock and a flail on a structure in America, that's kind of game over. When you see a ankh, a big stone ankh, I should say, like the Egyptian cross, when you see that in the middle of Mexico, you gotta say game over.
It is game over. And what Trey's talking about is in reference to what I just posted up in the Tron right now. If you go into South America, there is Stella E and Stella D called the Quergua statues. And if you look at I put it up in the Tron right now, the statues have the same false spear, crook, and flail as the ancient Egyptians. Now, is that just by chance? Or are they just imagining these things, Dwayne?
It might very well be by chance because, see, again, this goes back to the problem of you don't have primary sources. So if I were to ask you which Egyptian dynasty was the one that sailed to the Americas, you can
inconsequential.
That's my point. You can tell me because you don't have the primary sources. How is it inconsequential? If you ask a European, which European nation, was able to travel to the Americas? They'll tell you Spain. So why is it you can't bring to me a specific Egyptian dynasty that you claimed?
The very fact that Trey pointed out the Ankh, the crooked flail, false beard, pyramids, and everything else in cultural continuity and infinity, and the fact that you don't have an opposition to even bring credence to makes my entire point.
And you're making
And
my
one
point. But
thing,
you can answer a simple question: which Egyptian dynasty was the dynasty that sailed to the Americas? You can't even answer that simple question.
Inconsequential.
Because you can't answer. That's
again,
why.
Inconsequential. You know what that means?
let me
So
kind of
Columbus sailing to America is inconsequential.
No, what you're trying to make an argument about is inconsequential. Go ahead, Trey.
No, I'm trying to make an argument proving that you don't even understand what you're talking about. You have no sources to back up any of the claims that
you don't have opposition at all. You came here unprepared.
I'm a proponent of the African origins of civilization. I mean, that's just what I am. Call me a black supremacist. I don't give a fuck. I believe that there are common cultural traits that can only really come from a central source. I don't believe in the notion of everybody all over the world in one given point in time coming up with the same shit. I do not believe in that. I think it's nonsense. I think when people do that, they're lying. They don't want to admit that people helped them. But with that being said, the central source of civilization is now Valley civilization. When you see certain characteristic traits of that unique Horus worshiping religion of Kemet, that's what made Kemet what it was. It was the religion. It was the culture. It wasn't the sculptures. It was the culture, the people, the religion. That's what made Kemet separate from Nubia. Nubia was Ta Seti, the land of Set. Kemet worshiped Horus. It was almost like gang wars, religious. But Kemet's emblem, their gang sign, Kemet's gang sign was the croc and the flail. That's just what it is. There's no other people on earth who has that, unless they admit to coming from Kemet. Now, what I argue is you see the croc and the flail throughout various societies in so-called sub-Saharan Africa today. And to me, that's a clear sign of diffusion when Kemet was invaded by invaders. And they took over the land and the people went south into Nubia and from Nubia, they went throughout sub-Saharan Africa. Now, I'm one to believe that they didn't just go to sub-Saharan Africa. I don't believe that. I believe that they had knowledge of land all across this earth. And when you see certain things like the pyramid in Mexico and this alignment with Orion, something that only the Kemites knew with their pyramids. When you see the stela that the Olmecs put up there showing their origins, and you see at the bottom of it, you see the three pyramids of Egypt, the three great pyramids of Egypt. You see them aligned.
I put that in the Jumbotron as well. That's in the Jumbotron.
Go ahead. So when you see stuff like that, you can't wait for white people to say, yeah, that's what. They're never going to say that's what happened. They're never going. They don't even want to admit Egypt was black. To this day, they won't admit that. On TV, they'll put it in books that nobody reads, but they won't put that shit on TV. Michael Jackson had to do that.
But you know what's so funny? The first few scholars who even found the Olmecs were the ones who were going around saying how Negroid they were. And those were some of the same native local archaeologists there. It wasn't nobody black or nor white.
And a few things about the findings of Ivan Van Sertima that, nobody really talks about. When we talk about what he said, Ivan Van Sertima never, ever, ever said the Olmec civilization was an African civilization, meaning the majority of the population was African. He never said that. Never, ever, ever did he say that. What he said was the 6 to 13% of Negroid skulls that were distinct from all the other skulls in the grave sites, they constituted a royal class, and they brought over knowledge from now Valley civilization, and that's what kicked off the Olmec civilization. Also, what you find with these skeletons, it's not just skeletons. Some people, they ignore the fact that all of these skeletons are males, for one. Mm-hmm. All of the Negroid skeletons are males. Their women are of the native abstract, and their children are mixed breed abstract. Now, some people might say, well, you're confusing that with the Pygmies, because no, the fuck I'm not. The Pygmies were mixed in with those Mongoloids. That's why them damn Mexicans are so damn short today. When the Mongoloid wave came in and absorbed the Pygmies, they got into this little genetic mutation where they got short. They were short people. They were very, very short. Google the details of their height. That's why Mexicans and Guatemalans are midgets, because they come from that ancient Twa lineage that was there 10 plus thousand years ago. That Australoid pygmy strain got mixed in with the Mongoloid population, and that's how you get the modern Mexican, along with some Spaniard blood. So we're not talking about them when we say the Negroid skeletons. We're talking about that 6 to 13% of the grave sites that Ivan Van Sertima noted that had distinctly Negroid skulls from that localized mixture of pygmies and Mongoloid populations. Dumbasses like to pretend they don't understand that. It's 2 plus 2. But, you know, that's what the contingency is. And some people have said, well, they genetically tested. No, the fuck they didn't. That study was recanted, for one. And two, the contention would be those skeletons. Everybody knows that Olmec civilization was generally of a modern, well, not modern because they were darker, but of a somewhat Mongoloid, somewhat Negroid mixture. And I mean Australoid Negroid when I say that. Australoid, like pygmy type shit. But, you know, nobody really argues that, you know, the general population was African, you know, and that's something that some people really try to trip them up on. But the thing is, if y'all really want to test that theory, go to the skeletons that I can't say that guy's name. He's like a Polish physical anthropologist from back in the day who Ivan Van Sertima cited. It begins with a W. I don't even try to say that nigga's name. But you know, it was his data. That was the raw data right there. And in that, he identified, you know, they have their little goofy classifications of races, but he definitely identified a Negroid strain, and particularly that of the West African abstract. So that's my contingency. If y'all talking about DNA testing, that's what you need to test. Don't do a random sample. No. He said that those were Africans who came over there from a civilization and brought light to those people.
And to be very short here, I'm just going to go off of what Trey said about the sickle cell. Through various study, I posted up in Jumbotron, we know that sickle cell is associated with renal dysfunction and kidney disease, like Trey pointed out, both of which have been found in ancient Maya to have been medically treated or found as a disorder, which shows a pattern to my conclusion with the higher probability affecting Black people. Why I say this? Because of the fact that NCBI doubled down. It is currently unknown whether similar associations are observed in Hispanics, rare with Africans than Black Americans, and Native Americans aren't even mentioned amongst the most common. So if we're talking about where the signs are leading to, it would be Black Americans. Dwayne, you probably didn't read that Harvard study, like you said, but I will also say that Harvard study, I will read in verbatim about what they said as well. Here we analyze the genome-wide data show that the some Amazonian Native Americans descend partly from Native American family populations that carry ancestry more closely to the indigenous Australians, New Guineans, and the Admin Islanders than the present-day Eurasians or Native Americans. This signature is not present to the same extent or at all to the present-day Northern and Central Americans or the 12,000 Clovis genome that people tend to suggest. So basically it's telling you right there that even in the first family populations, Native Americans weren't even present themselves.
Okay, I'm not really clear how it makes Black Americans indigenous, though. And again, that goes back to my point, though, that you're bringing me this Harvard study, and the sources I prepared were actual Black Americans who enslaved in the Americas who never claimed to be indigenous. Now, can you name a slave narrative written by someone who claimed to be a Black indigenous?
There's an oral history amongst us that says that we are native here in the Americas.
So you don't have a slave narrative, okay?
My Aunt Bessie.
Yes, a lot of our family. Yeah, a lot of our family tends to carry on that oral tradition, and I don't take our oral.
So you have a slave narrative, then? Okay, got it.
Excuse me.
So what I'm hearing is you can't name a slave narrative. That's all I asked for, and I got my answer.
Literally, that's it's inconsequential. But go ahead, Trey.
Got you. So let me just kind of reiterate with it. Like when it comes to native to African Americans, damn near all of us got an oral tradition of coming from some land of Native American ancestry.
And there's oral traditions coming from Africa.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if we're relying on oral
without a doubt.
tradition,
I'm not. First of all, I'm not one of them that denies the translated slave trade. I'm not one of them that denies. That's stupid to me. You know, I'm not one of them. So
but is that not the argument being made here?
I know it's some to make it. What you say?
No, but so the argument here then, if you're arguing that Black Americans are indigenous, in a sense, you're trying to argue that
at least partially. At least partially.
But okay, so when you say partially, what
I'm going to, since you want to get down to the nitty gritty of it, Dwayne, since you keep pointing to that and you think that anecdotal evidence makes the marker here. First of all, you're not a Black American. You don't know our oral traditions. And yes, me and Trey just codified the fact that our family has passed that down, that we are in fact indigenous to America.
And that's
recently
the problem.
With my grandmother, who astoundingly said that we are indigenous to the Americas, but
that's not really evident. That's the answer.
It's not.
You understand what the antidote is? That's the antidote.
But just, but
that's not primary source. When I'm talking
down to the primary source.
Okay, then I asked for a slave narrative. Give me a slave narrative by someone who claims to be indigenous.
Dwayne. When it comes, Dwayne, it's our family. Like I understand.
But do you understand what primary source is, though? I'm not talking about family. I'm talking about
the primary source.
No, when I say that, my 67-year-old grandmother, she knew her grandmother, who was a full-blooded Native American. Her and all her brothers and sisters who are alive today knew their grandmother, who was a full-blooded Native American, who they said had hair down to her buttocks. That we don't sit around and say we need to no, that's grandma. Who the fuck we trying to prove that to? Who the fuck are you to tell it me it ain't my granny? Oh, Nanny, she must have permed her hair. No, and I'm not trying to be hostile or nothing, but I'm saying, bro, like I don't know how else to point that out to you, brother.
Yeah, but the point I'm making here is when I'm talking about primary sources, I'm talking about the people who are actually enslaved. When I'm talking about present-day people, we're talking about people who are enslaved. Can you name?
Why would we be?
But this is a historical debate. We're talking history now. We're not talking about present day. So what I'm asking,
I would definitely say that what I just said is firsthand evidence.
But that's not historical. But that's not historical.
Phone right now.
Was she enslaved?
Huh?
Well, was she a slave?
My granny is 67 years old. No,
so that's my point. But that's my point. So that's not relevant to this debate. If we're having a debate about history now,
her granddaddy was born in 1880s, 1870s.
And that's still after slavery.
Dude, are you serious?
Yeah, I'm being very serious.
1880s, 1870s. What do you think would have happened in that 10 to 15 year period? What big jumble?
What are you talking about?
Fucked over.
What is that relevant? That's not relevant.
So what you, dude? Ben Butler was born in 1883.
Okay.
My granddaddy, who died in 08, who's tatted on my arm, that's his daddy. He just died in 08. His daddy was born in 1883. John T. Butler. His mama was a full-blooded native named Dulcie. I don't know. Well, ain't Ann? You sure she ain't have a perm? I mean, I don't know what else to say, brother.
But the thing is,
I got my whole line of elders.
But that's what we're talking about here. We're talking. He's referencing anecdotal evidence and oral traditions, crazy. Whether it was written down or not. The fact that we have the anecdotal evidence from our ancestors, and you're trying to use the same thing as doctrine. How is that really making your point here?
Well, see, you are making my point because the thing is, you can't pinpoint to me evidence from people who were enslaved during that period who are arguing that they were already in America before slavery. Most slave narratives that you'll find are from people who either were from Africa or had grandparents from Africa.
So that
What I'm
first of all,
asking is
let's
where
make
these
the point that that's literally inconsequential to all the vast majority of evidence that we have here anyway. On top of the fact that we know that there was a concerted effort to even remove a lot of Black people in their documents as far as in erasure, as far as being indigenous here into the Americas. That was with William Plecker, as just for one reference there.
because you don't have a historical argument to back up what you're doing.
Oh, I do
You're
have a
citing all
historical
this
argument,
genetic.
but you wanted to
You're citing
bypass it.
genetic
You
studies,
wanted
but
to
these genetic
bypass it.
sources. You don't have
I
the
can go
argument.
into
I specifically asked you for a slave narrative. You haven't presented one yet.
that's
So,
inconsequential.
but that's exactly the problem.
That's
Evidence
inconsequential.
you don't have is inconsequential to you, so you start bringing this DNA studies, and these DNA studies
So
aren't history.
how does that? So that's just one. First of all, DNA studies are just one metric. I never rest my head on one metric.
But that's
If you
all you're
really want me
doing
to go
because
into the nitty gritty of
you're not
everything,
bringing any primary
I
sources.
can
You're
do
not
that
bringing
as
slave
well. You
narratives.
don't have a single. This is the thing about you, Dwayne. You talk about primary sources all day. You don't have a single source of anything. You haven't posted anything. So what are you really using your argument for? What is your source?
Well, I wrote an article recently about my sources. So,
Your
for
article ain't no
example,
damn source, boy. What are you
I
talking about?
listed, but you haven't read it. So, for example, I
I read
listed,
your argument. I read
yeah.
them.
So, what's your counter argument then? That's what I'm
Where's
waiting
the
for.
citation? Post
What's
it
it?
then. Post it.
You said you read it.
I read it, and I don't see citations.
Which article are you talking about? The last one?
I read your stuff on Medium.
Yeah. So you know what citations are you asking for? You read the argument. What's the counter argument?
You're speaking from source, right? What source were you speaking from?
No, I'm asking you what's your counter argument.
My counter argument is everything else that I've been posting. As a matter of fact, I just posted something real quick. Bodie, I'm about to let you up in a second, but so they've been making Moorish statues of us for since they landed over here in 1600s. This is one of them. This is called the Cluster and the Emerald Moor. And if you read in part of it, that the Moor's tattoos and feather crown were taken from the contemporary illustrations of travel accounts that the figure is supposed to represent an American Indian. How fitting that American Indian would look so Negroid.
Yeah, so the issue I'm noticing here is you don't really seem to have a counter argument to anything that I've.
You don't have an argument at all, Dwayne. That's the point here.
No, but see, the thing is, you're the one who invited me to this debate because you want to debate what I wrote.
I'm hosting Scholar.
Okay, but that's not relevant to what I wrote. I'm here because you want to debate what I wrote, and so far I'm not really hearing you raise any argument. You're asking me for citations. Again, you keep relying on these sources. What is your specific issue with my arguments? That's what I'm waiting for.
Dwayne, the entire thing was because you tried to pretend that Black Americans were not indigenous to the Americas. That was the primary reason why I even responded to your first tweet.
Yeah, and I'm asking you what about what I wrote in my articles are you raising a counterpoint to? You haven't done that yet.
Because the fact that you don't have any sources to back claim for an opposition.
That's not a counter argument. Telling me I don't have.
Let me say. I would like to argue that regardless of what the evidence I provided, hell, I would like to say that a lot of those dark-skinned images we see at the Yamasi, hell, I'm poised to say because there is genetic evidence of us being over here, hell, that was probably our ancestors to a degree. Yeah, I'll say that. You know what the Yamasi look like, don't you?
Yes, he does, I'm sure.
Could I make a recommendation? Because I wasn't sure. Did you guys get everything you wanted to say? Did Marak and Dwayne, did you guys get all the arguments that you laid out, like, uninterrupted? Or has that not happened yet?
I don't think that's happening here because I realize, there's really no debate being had here. I came here expecting a debate and it turns out.
Right. So can we do that instead? Can we we're debating whether Black Americans are indigenous to the United States, right? And so why don't you guys just...
He doesn't have a counter argument, Bodie.
Hold up. Just to organize it, right? It'll be easier to edit even, right? Why doesn't Dwayne, since Dwayne hasn't really been speaking recently, why doesn't Dwayne, lay out his argument uninterrupted for a few minutes, and then Marak can lay out his argument uninterrupted, and then you guys can go back and forth based off of the arguments that you made, right, and the evidence that you presented.
Yeah, see, but that's my issue, though, because I was invited to the space based on what I wrote, and so far the discussion really hasn't been relevant to any of the arguments I've raised in my articles or anything. that I've written.
Yeah.
And
Do you think you could just not even summarize, just go through what you want to from your articles, like all that evidence? Because I'm not sure everyone has read your articles or knows what your arguments are.
So the main one with Van Sertima, the points that I raise is, and I mentioned this earlier in the discussion as well, that a lot of his arguments are flawed because he's now relying on primary sources. So, for example, when he argued about the Egyptian contact in the Americas, and he claimed that the Egyptians sailed to Central America, he didn't have a timeline put in place because there was no historical evidence. So when he wrote they came before Columbus, he actually had to go back and change his historical timeline based on updated historical information. To me, that's not real scholarship. That's just guesswork. So he changed it from the 25th dynasty to the 19th dynasty because he didn't have a solid historical foundation. His second argument is Abu Bakari from Mali arrived in Central America as well. And it's the same problem. There's no primary historical document showing that he successfully traveled to the Americas. We do have historical documents saying that he did attempt to make a voyage across the ocean. He never came back home, so no one knows what became of him. But if you read They Came Before Columbus, Van Sertima is very vivid in terms of the details that he paints about Abu Bakari arriving in the Americas and all that. But the fact is, we don't know whether or not that happened. So the primary issue I've raised with Van Sertima is just it's very difficult to prove his conclusions because we don't have historical arguments or historical evidence to prove it. And the problem with Van Sertima's work is he uses terminology like beyond a shadow of a doubt. So he makes it seem like everything that he's writing is provable and factual information when a lot of it is, as I said, guesswork and conjure based on the lack of historical evidence. So that was the initial post that I made regarding Van Sertima. Now, regarding whether or not Black Americans are indigenous, that was a separate article. And the point that I made in that article is that when you look at primary sources, and by this I mean the writings and the documents from Black people who were enslaved during that particular time period, most of them point to coming from Africa. You don't find too many of them claiming to be indigenous. In fact, the Back to Africa movement was started by Thomas Peters. He's one of the early advocates of that movement, and he was one of the founders of Sierra Leone. He was from Africa. Another early founder of the Back to Africa movement was Paul Coffey. Coffey is a West African Akan name. Now, you look at the poetry of Phyllis Wheatley. She specifically wrote a poem about being from Africa. We have slave narratives from people like Alado Ekwano, who is from Africa, Omar bin Said, also from Africa. So the point I'm making is when you look at these slave narratives, you don't find any slave narratives from people who were indigenous or claimed that they were indigenous to the Americas. Most of these people were people who were directly from Africa or had direct ancestors who from Africa. I wrote about Martin Delaney. Martin Delaney was the grandson of an African chief. So that's my argument regarding whether or not Black Americans are indigenous, that you don't have the primary documents where Black Americans themselves claim that they are indigenous. Most claimed that they were from Africa. And the final point that I'll make that really demonstrates this African connection are institutions that were named after Africa, such as the AMIE Church. That was, the African Episcopal, African Methodist Episcopal Church. These are institutions that are named after Africa. So again, if these people are indigenous, why are they naming the institutions after Africa?
The very fact that Dwayne is speaking from absolutely nothing makes my entire point here. He's not speaking from source. I'm the one that's actually speaking from source.
Phil Wheatley is a source.
We're going back and forth. Marak.
I'm giving
you just spewing anecdotal and inconsequential things has nothing to do with people who actually went out there. Let's be clear. Van Sertima spent decades researching the things that he's found on the people of America. And he cited plenty of sources. That's what happens. And that's what you do when you're a scholar in the field. And so Van Sertima did the right thing. And yes, he did go back and he reworded and retweaked some things because he had some things incorrect, as you should. You don't leave it for mystery or for it to be led to be incorrect. That's exactly what you should do. So the fact that you don't really have any primary sources to go against it is my very point.
And
you don't have primary sources.
And I would like to say,
Van
But I would like
Sertima didn't have primary sources either.
before
The
we
fact
go,
that
hold up.
hold on really quickly, the fact that Van Sertima is being vetted and given credibility through people like Cheek Anta Diop, Asa Hillard, and even the head of the Smithsonian Institute,
That
as well as Sage
that's an appeal to authority.
Encyclopedia.
That's
He's
a fallacy.
published
It's an
in
appeal to authority
Sage
fallacy.
Encyclopedia, while your opposers are not.
But that's an appeal to authority fallacy. I mean, as someone engaged in a debate, you should know that's a fallacy. That's
Policy for Black people for what reason?
what?
You just said an authority policy. For what reason?
It's a fallacy. It's an authority. It's an
Why
appeal
would
to
we? Why
authority
was
fallacy. It's a debate fallacy. It's not
these
a
are
proper argument.
racist? And since when do they want to speak in favor for Black people?
That's not a counter argument. You have no real counter argument, man. You're wasting my time.
No. That's the projection that we are identifying here. You don't have a counter argument because you're not speaking from source.
I don't need to. You're the one who
material.
invited. You're the one who invited me for a debate. The whole issue is you have a.
And
You want to.
the fact that we're debating here and you don't have source material, I don't even know why you wasted your time.
Marat, can you give your positive argument? Dwayne gave his positive argument, right? He said, I don't believe it because of this, that, and this and that, right? Can you do that? Why do you believe that? Whatever you believe. Could you just go through that?
I believe what I believe because I can name dozens of source material, whether that is through Harvard and CBI, genetics, the whole metrics, linguistics, measurements, cultural affinity as well, cowrie shells, shell money being used not only in Africa but also in the Americas. They found as well a lot of base points. And which has been identified. Trey has talked about the sickle cell association here. How the stockades and mounds over in the Americas were vastly similar to the ones over in Africa that I can post as well. The very fact that Leo Wiener was if for nothing else, he was a highly credited linguist who wrote 3 volumes of evidence to this and found vast amounts of place names that were Bantu and Arabic over here in pre-Columbian America. The very fact that they also had more cultural affinity to when we're talking about their burying practices, they had a thing called the mummy packs. And I'm going to read from what Leo Wiener wrote about these mummy packs. We have chiefly African plants, sweet potatoes, yams, manioc in the mummy packs because of the food for the common people was chiefly due to Negro influence. And now what I'm about to do now is that I'm about to post these mummy packs and you can make an assumption for yourself.
Okay. Dwayne, do you want to respond to that?
Not really. I'm still waiting for a counter argument to any of the points that I raised before. I still haven't.
You don't have points to even oppose. You're not speaking from a source. What is your point here if you're not speaking from anything? And back to my point about the mummy packs. The mummy packs here are showing that yes, there you go. That's the original mummy pack. And you look inside of them, they found decomposing people of dark skin and afros.
Okay, so I wrote down what Dwayne said. So the issue about when the Egyptians had contact in the Americas and how Ivan Van Sertima had to change his timeline, you both agree that he did. You just disagreed that if that had an implication as to whether he was doing guesswork or not, right? So you responded to that, Marat. And then he mentioned Abu Bakari. He says that there's no evidence that he actually arrived in the Americas and that you can't produce any documents on that.
Right. All we have is oral history from the West Africans.
Okay. And so you're saying that that's good enough. Okay. Then he says that people like Phyllis Wheatley or Omar bin Said, they talk about how Omar bin Said knows exactly where he came from in Africa, right? And so he's saying that the slave narratives consistently have people saying that they're African. And you don't see the slave narrative saying, hey, we're indigenous, we're aboriginal. And so that's the question that he's posing.
Well, I already countered that argument because there was why would they give credence to us in the original point of us being indigenous to Americas, especially when you had people who were already astoundingly very much putting it out there that they did not want that information out there, which is why they went and reclassified and completely destroyed many documents that would codify that his name is William Plecker. So I've already answered that as well. He keeps talking about these slave narratives as if we're classifying ourselves and haven't been classified back and forth. Rachel Vinnie sued in 1791, for example, Montgomery County on December 23rd. Rachel filed for her freedom. The evidence showed that her ancestor, Mary, who had come into Eastern Virginia by ship with her granddaughter, they were identified and classified as Indians, not Africans. But no Indian tribe was also mentioned. In short, she had lost her case and was thrown into slavery and reclassified as Negro. So I just don't understand what we're really going.
So what about institutions like the AAME church that he mentioned? Do you think that they are rightly named after Africans or wrongly named after Africans?
Who?
Like I forget what it's called, the African Episcopal whatever church, that thing, AAME. Are you not familiar with it?
No.
It's a super old church.
You talking about AME?
Yeah, that one.
AME? Yeah, that's my daddy's
goes
people.
To one.
Yeah, that's my daddy's
goes
people.
To one of those. So yeah, how would you respond to that?
Who?
No, like, do you think so? Those churches exist, right? They're very old, where Black Americans name their churches as African. So he's asking, why would they do that unless they believe they were African?
So the thing is that the first Africans that came over here, right? They came over here in 1619, and so the ones that were here, yeah, they knew they were from Africa, and they were here with other Black peoples that were already indigenous to America. Now, we were in a position where we are not allowed to continue our cultural customs or anything of that nature. So the ones that are born after and the ones that are born after and the more Africans that are coming in, why would there be much documentation of people who are going around saying that they will be anything else but? And furthermore, I already made it clear that Leo Weiner at Harvard University already pointed out the evidence that there was vast amounts of Bantu languages over here in America.
So
anyway.
Did you hear that, Dwayne?
So I don't know how
that
that's
there were
really
Africans who came over here due to the transatlantic slave trade, but there was another group of Black people who predates them, and that was the goal, it sounds like, of white supremacists or Europeans in America to conflate the two.
I'm just saying as well, like if I'm born in America, if I'm a slave over here in Africa, and then my descendant is obviously a descendant of me, and we're not able to produce our cultural customs and whatever or what have you for generations on end, why would we be in a position to be talking about our indigenous status or cultural customs in continuation at that particular point? That's logic. Go ahead, Dwayne.
I don't have anything else to say to that. I mean, I already raised the point that if the argument is Black people are indigenous to America, then there should be a lot of documents with Black people claiming to be indigenous, because what I'm hearing is that the argument is the majority of Black people in America were already in America before slavery, yet no one has been able to present a single slave narrative of someone who was indigenous. No one was able to present an actual institution connecting Black people to being indigenous to America. All I'm hearing is that it's a conspiracy by white people to cover up the fact that Black people were indigenous.
I'm just saying, I didn't say it was a conspiracy. I'm just saying, why would they? Number one, and the very fact that you rest all of your entire argument on that particular thing, I think you is pretty clear and cut here that you don't really have argument here.
But that is the argument. The argument is that Black people who were enslaved themselves identify.
I've already told you we've had a long-standing oral tradition, and you can't even codify that.
It's not even long-standing. But here's the thing: the oral tradition that I'm hearing went back to grandparents. That's not even very long-standing. I'm talking about the period before that. I'm talking about going back to the 1800s, 1700s. That's the period I'm talking about. I'm not talking going back.
First of all, let's bring into logic that we were completely illiterate. All right, we were not documenting. So why would we be documenting that we would be?
I just named slave narratives that were documented. It's a fallacy to say that all Black people in America
And
Well, it
again, a lot of them were continuing to be brought over to America, and then
Be back, family.
generationally, they would have descendants that were literally African. So why would some of them even go into the
but
particular topic
but
of
if
being
the
Indian?
majority were indigenous, then shouldn't there be more indigenous descendants than the African descendants?
That's after contamination and after being forced bred with these people that were coming in from Africa as well. On top of the fact that there was already African presence here in the Americas anyway. So it wasn't just the transatlantic slave trade. Again, we're talking about the great possibilities of Egyptians already being over here, and the Moors were over here, and that's exactly why he was able to translate for Columbus or whoever you want to place name as far as that commodity that they had over here. Arabic and Bantu again was already found over here. The fact that the bottle gourd
Wait,
was
Columbus
had
never.
the bottle gourd traveled from Africa to Asia into the Americas.
Are you arguing that the Moors were in North America?
They found that the Moors were the Algonquian language does have Moorish influence in it. I can post that as well.
Columbus never. It sounds like you're conflating things now. Columbus never sailed to North America.
I never said anything about Columbus sailing to North
But you
America.
said Columbus used Morse to translate. What was he translating?
Moorish hold on.
So Dwayne, what about the question about indigeneity, right? So how are you defining indigenous? Because all throughout the Americas, enslaved people are actually considered indigenous to some extent because they're not a part of the settler colonial
My bad, I had a
state.
package. Go ahead.
Dwayne?
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? So like,
Yeah.
so
what I'm saying, indigenous in this context would be black people who are already in the Americas before the slave trade. And what I'm arguing is that if there were, and I did say at the beginning, I'm not denying that there could have been black people who were here already, but what I'm saying is if there was such a large number of black people who were already indigenous, that should be more apparent in the historical records.
So again, back to my point about Columbus and the Moors. Yes, I don't want to confuse the audience. Columbus didn't set land into North America specifically. It was to the islands. And to that very point too, we're talking about archaeology. They found that they found black people that dated back to the 1200s AD that were already here as well, and that was through the Smithsonian Institute and Oxford University. But as far as the Moors themselves, yes, the Moors were already here in the Americas, and they were translating for Columbus and whoever else was documenting as well.
Do you have a source for that? Because Columbus never said anything about that in his journal.
Never said anything about what?
Using Morse for translations, that's not in
No,
his
he didn't
journal.
say that, but who else was translating?
Oh, okay, so you don't have a source, got it.
Yeah, because I need logic, right? Because the very fact that the Moors were exiled the same year that Columbus came over, which means that they were using Moors and their intellect and their boats to come over to the Americas, because the Moors had already been trading and translating over here with the indigenous people. So yes, that makes the most sense than some white people who just by chance the same year decided to come over here and already know what the natives were already talking
Here's
about.
the thing, and I could tell you haven't read Columbus's journal. Columbus actually didn't know what the natives were saying. There was a language.
No, he did not. I
Yeah,
didn't say he did.
But you said the Moors translated. There was no translation going on. Columbus didn't know what the natives were telling him. He didn't have translators.
Yes, like I said, you want to go by I don't know what, but I'm
By
going by
Columbus's journal.
repeated
That's what I'm saying. You need to
scholar.
read. You
I'm
need to
going
read
by
his primary
repeated scholar
sources.
that I can post right now.
And I'm going by
Then
Columbus.
post
I could
it.
post the journal. I could show
Then
you.
post it.
Okay.
But yes, it wouldn't. Somebody would have had translated, like I said, and it definitely wasn't no Spaniards that traveled to the Americas for the first time the same year they got exiled with the Moors. So it makes no sense. As far as any other argument, Dwayne really doesn't have an argument here, as I've established. I'm talking about every single metric here. He, on the other hand, cannot speak to every other metric. Matter of fact, I'm about to bring up another cultural affinity here, people, and I'll post that as well. They're going to be talking about the liquor. In Bantu countries of Africa, there is a made liquor known as Pombe. A description of the preparation of Pombe was given by Joao dos Santos in 605. The wine usually drunk by the Kafirs is made of millet and is called Pombe. That the same Negro Pomberos were active in America is shown by a large number of documents. The Spanish did not develop the word Pombe, but stuck closer to the Latin pulpa as a base of a word for native liquor, hence pulperia. A shop was in the Indies called paperia, and they were essentially drinking Bantu liquor. That Bantu liquor, not coincidentally, goes right back to the Egyptians because they drank millet beer, in which they also referenced.
Dwayne, you have a response?
No, I think I'm good here.
Okay, yeah. Do you guys want to give out closing statements? You know, just summarize what's been said and what's happened so far.
I'm going to probably close with more source and evidence in which Dwayne does not have. Speaking on cotton, so far we have only established the absence of all criteria chronology of Peruvian cotton, and now we shall, by the linguistic criteria, show that if cotton was present before Columbus, it must have been introduced in Peru directly or indirectly by Mandingo Negroes. In 1532, the Indians were compelled to a plant in those in which they had to render as a tribute, and over this, the Calpuix, in which basically means the head of the state of the particular people, it was found that the Calpuix were chiefly Negroes who immediately after the conquest treated the Indians with great severity. And it comes down to the fact that opposing this leaves the audience to believe that there was either a needed reliance on the white man to bring us over to America from Africa on that current, and we couldn't possibly do it on our own, speaks to the inferiority of these Pan-Africans. It's either that or we populated the entire planet before morphological change, which is true, or we stopped in the middle of the Sahara Desert and never migrated past that point because of a magical de-Negro barrier, which is laughable. I have sources on sources. Oh, and I think, did Dwayne leave? This is the thing.
Powerful closing statement.
I have sources on sources, and I just don't think he has it. That's my closing statement. Closing statement is that Marok has sources and Dwayne does not. Find full episodes of the podcast featuring straight facts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Also, check out our Instagram for more Marok Oris content, including the shop and our subscription service for exclusives. Peace, mer.